And welcome to the second Regional Ocean Policy Dialogue in Southeast Asia, organised by the OECD together with the Indonesian Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investments, the ASEAN Secretariat, the coordinating body for the seas of East Asia, and the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. My name is Anthony Cox. I'm the Deputy Director for the Environment at the OECD and also coordinator for the OECD's work on the ocean. And it's my pleasure to be the Master of Ceremonies for today's event. To kick things off, I would like to introduce Rodolfo Lacey, who is the OECD Environment Director, who will provide some opening remarks. Rodolfo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Deputy Minister, NDRT, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this second Regional Ocean Policy Dialogue in the Southeast Asia region. Last December, before COVID-19 struck, we organized our first dialogue in Bali. This year, our dialogue focuses on marine plastic pollution, a complex issue that requires urgent, very urgent action. In 2010, between 4 and 13 million tons of plastic entered the ocean. That was 10 years ago, our estimates. Plastics pollution has gone up significantly since then, especially now that COVID-19 has slowed down recycling efforts and increased the use of disposable plastic products such as face masks. The problem is especially noticeable in Southeast Asia, for example, the Mekong River catchment area alone. Up to 36,000 tons of plastic are carried to the sea each year. This estimate was made before the Chinese ban on plastic waste imports that diverted much of this waste to countries in Southeast Asia. Furthermore, you know that recent estimates show that marine debris in general, not just marine plastic debris, directly cost Asian countries more or less $2.5 billion US each year. This figure has gone up by roughly a factor of 8 since 2009, driven in part by the increase in marine plastics pollution over the last decade. We must address this urgent challenge in an integrated manner, addressing it from all kinds of sides. This means, for example, looking at the pathways through which plastics enter the water, such as through improper disposal or inadequate wastewater treatment plants. And also it means that reducing plastics production by limiting single-use plastic are necessary. These disposable bags must be controlled, or we have to find a substitute, or by developing commercially viable alternatives to many plastic products that are in our markets. Addressing marine plastic pollution does require a mix of policy instruments, including regulations that are sometimes very tough to implement, and economic incentives. Policy coherence needs to be prioritized so that these actions are effective, coherent across different sectors, different levels of government, and different initiatives must be in place. That is what this session 1 of today's dialogue is about. But countries also need adequate financing in order to implement these policies and initiatives. Some of them are very costly. So in session 2, we will address this specific issue because approximately $278 million US in official development assistance of ODA was provided for projects that addressed the marine plastics pollution between 2013 and 2018. That might sound like a lot, but it's only 0.5%, sorry, 0.1% of total order for that period. We must scale up these blue-green investments. 2 recent OECD reports that you can download from our webpage, Reframing Financing and Investment for a Sustainable Ocean Economy and Sustainable Ocean for All, show governments how to do this. Tomorrow, we will begin by exploring the specific initiatives that address marine plastic pollution. These are food for thought for the breakout group of discussions, to which I invite you all to play an active role, please. This is an opportunity for you to share your experiences. To stimulate these discussions, we have shared with you a series of country profiles containing plastic and waste related information for the 10 ocean member states. These profiles gather existing statistics, but also highlight gaps in the data. Better measurement will be crucial for decision making and also for the monitoring progress. I would finally like to thank our partners in the region for their help in organizing this dialogue. The coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment of Indonesia, thank you very much. The Asian Secretariat, the UNEP coordinating body of the seas of East Asia, COBSEA, and the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. While we believe that the OECD has some unique and relevant expertise that can contribute to resolving ocean plastic pollution, we know that we are newcomers in the region and rely on close cooperation with our partners. We are also grateful to the Swedish Ministry of Environment for providing the necessary funding for this second dialogue. Finally, I would like to thank the OECD team responsible for organizing this relevant event: Anthony, Kate, Aja, Valentina, Jeffrey, Christina, you can see them here in the screen, Enrico, Nacera, and also Peter and Piera that will be speakers today. So I look forward to a fruitful dialogue over the next 2 days. Now I would like to turn to Deputy Minister Nani Hendiarty for her keynote remarks. Dr. Hendiarty, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Dr. Rodolfo Lezi, OECD Director of Environment, and distinguished representative from COBSEA, UN ESCAP, ASEAN Secretariat, resource persons, and all participants of the second Regional Ocean Policy Dialogue, financing solution to address marine plastic pollution in the Southeast Asia. So very good afternoon to everyone, and also very good morning for those who are in Europe at this moment. I wish everybody for good health during this unusual condition. First of all, let me thank to the OECD and also UN ESCAP and COBSEA with the support from the ASEAN Secretariat that held this event for us to share information regarding marine plastic solutions. I believe this event can be useful to give insight to one another on crisis we are facing and find the opportunities we can get with regards marine plastic solution. So ladies and gentlemen, the year of 2020 is a year full of the challenges for Indonesian government as well as for other countries in the world in the connection with the COVID-19 pandemic. So the COVID-19 pandemic has made the marine debris challenge even more acute in Indonesia, especially considering in the increasing of the medical and plastic packaging. Report from our National Research Agency shows that there has been an increase in the plastic waste generation and the volume of plastic waste entering the rivers by up to 16%. This is due to the changing of the lifestyle of the people who are more active at home and an increase also in the online shopping. So however, government financing policies are more focused on effort to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, and it has prompted a change in the program and budget allocation so that environmental related plan program cannot be implemented or reduced significantly. Just for an example, the budget to support the restoration of the Citarum River was reduced significantly until 10% left. So it much a very big amount in the reducing the budget. So this financial difference is likely to continue in the next few years. For this reason, an innovative financial mechanism and development in inclusive cooperation among stakeholders and private sector, both actions are more needed than ever to support various programs to address marine plastic pollution at national and regional level. So ladies and gentlemen, back to year 2017, Indonesia was recorded to generate about 6.8 million metric ton of the plastic waste, where only 10%, not only, actually it's a big amount, 10% of it ended up in the sea, lake and rivers, and 60% was mismanaged. And this percentage also have a potential also to leakage to the waters, and only by 10% went to the recycling process. We were fully aware on the impact of the marine plastic pollutions that has caused a lot of harm to both the environment and the economy. And in the end, it would ultimately affect to the human health. Departing from this awareness and the visions to make maritime a new axis of Indonesian sustainable economic development, the government has set a target to improve national solid waste management, including reuse of the marine plastic debris. So the government of Indonesia has enacted Presidential Decree number 83 year 2018 concerning handling marine debris, with a view to reduce 70% of the marine debris by 2025. This ambitious target came along with the National Plan of Actions for 2018 until 2025. It provides strategic directions for all line ministries to contribute to the marine debris reductions goal through a wide array of the intervention, including through policy, behavior change program, infrastructural interventions, innovation of technology, and financial mechanism. So ladies and gentlemen, innovation is needed along the entire plastic life cycle to redesign product, create new supply chain model on post-consumer material and material substitutes, as well as to develop new standard. Improving the financial sustainability of the recycling market based on technical health and environment standards are critical milestones in the path to tackle marine pollution. Indonesia has a plastic tarot program that used by both the government and also private sector actors in many provinces. Indonesia has also accelerated the construction of the waste to energy processing plants, and also refuse-derived fuel facilities collaborated with the cement industries and steam power plant as a potential of taker. So ladies and gentlemen, let me underline a pivotal role of the private and informal sector in dealing with the waste management. In according with the Indonesia's Ministry of the Environment and Forestry number 75 in 2019, producer in the manufacturing, retail, and food and beverage industries should meet 30% of waste reduction by 2028. So another thing is price. The Packaging and Recycling Association has launched a packaging recovery organization initiative to involve more stakeholders in the recycling and packaging material to increase recycling rates. So the partnership should support the Indonesian recycling industry to extend their focus from the PET plastic to multi-layer and lower value plastics. We, with the support of the National Plastic Action Partnership, especially from the Policy Task Force, the government is aiming to develop clear standards for recycling, which prevents the private sector from mobilizing financing to invest in plastic recyclability. So also, furthermore, for the referring to the roadmap prepared by the NPEP, uh, National Plastic Action Partnership, for the Financial Task Force, to achieve the government target requires additional investment worth around 18 billion US dollar in capital investment between 2017 until 2040, and an estimated annual increase of the 1 billion in operational financing must be mobilized for solid waste management system by 2040. Financial mechanism support is important to be developed in filling the investment gap. It includes incubating and scaling up innovation, and closing the operational financing gap for city level waste collection and recycling system by improving domestic revenues and industry co-funding, and also enabling capital investment in water and recycling system through the system changes, and also technology development as well as blended finance approaches. So we are now also in the close discussion with the Minderu Foundation Trust to promoting inclusive partnership toward doubling the national plastic waste recycling rate. As to the informal sector, the coordinating ministry also support better waste management through Waste Bank. As reported by the Ministry of the Environment, there were more than 8,000 Waste Bank across 34 provinces in Indonesia. By empowering local communities and leaders with capacity building on how to operationalize and sustain in the long run. Ladies and gentlemen, as a conclusion, I would like to stress that the government of Indonesia put its serious concerns on handling marine debris. We fully aware that this issue needs to be tackled by collaborating with all stakeholders, government institutions, researchers, private sectors, informal sectors, as well as people who work individually or jointly in the waste management area. So I believe if we can work on it together with the greater cooperation among the stakeholders, we could find innovative solutions for the technological development and financing schemes that are mutually beneficial from social, economic, and environment perspective. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nani Hendiati.
Yeah.
Your opening and welcome remarks are very much appreciated to help set the scene for the dialogue today and, and tomorrow. We're about to move into session one. Before I introduce our moderator for the session one, I'd just like to remind participants of some of the ground rules for the meeting. These include muting your microphone at all times, except when the chair gives you the floor. Please rename yourself in the participants window with your organization or country and your name. And then if you want to ask questions, you can raise your hand or write your questions in the chat window. And there are there's the guidance for participants in your window now. So we're now ready to move into session one. And I would like to introduce Jurka Tamlander, who is the COBSEA coordinator, who will be moderating session one. Jurka, I will hand the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Deputy Minister Nani Hendiarti, Director Rodolfo Lassi, dear participants. It's a great pleasure for me and an honor to moderate this session on addressing marine plastic pollution in Southeast Asia, policy coherence for effective action. Plastic permeates our society. It's in many ways emblematic of our times. And while it's brought us immense benefits, plastic pollution is of course a bit ubiquitous. It's a hazard to environmental health. It's a hazard to human well-being, and it's an obstacle to sustainable development. Successfully addressing it requires that everyone is on board. It requires a whole of government approach, and it requires policy coherence across different dimensions, as Director Lassi mentioned in his remarks. I think it needs a cross-sector coherence to rationally address production, use, and disposal. It requires across levels of government coherence, for example, bearing in mind the strong mandate for waste management vested in local government. And it requires coherence across countries because economies are so interlinked and because marine litter is such a highly transboundary issue. So coherence in responses are very much dependent on identification of common policy priorities based on a common understanding of the issue. This we need data, we need science, we need knowledge, and as Ibu Nani, I believe, said, we need also a process that acknowledges and involves the full range of stakeholders. So within this session, the objective is to identify and discuss some of the main policy challenges in Southeast Asia, as well as best practices and solutions for a coherent and integrated approach. I'm very, very happy from COBSEA side to organize this with OECD and the Indonesian Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investments, building on our collaboration in the Ocean Policy Dialogue last year, as well as with the ASEAN Secretariat and with ESCAP. I'm also very, very happy to welcome the excellent speakers, discussants, whom I will introduce in a moment. To begin with, and to set the scene for our discussion, I would like to welcome Ms. Yuna Lyons to give an overview presentation. Now, Yuna is a senior research fellow in the Ocean Law and Policy Program of the Center of International Law at the National University of Singapore. She spent more than 2 decades in global ocean governance, regional regime building for the protection of the marine environment, and with a particular focus on Southeast Asia and over recent years, marine plastic pollution. So Yuna, before I give you the floor, I have to remind you and echo Anthony's remarks. We have a very packed agenda, so please keep your presentation to 7 minutes. I apologize in advance if I may interrupt you at some point. I will try not to. And with that, please, Yuna, the floor is yours, and I look forward to your presentation that will set the scene for our discussion in this session. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Would it be possible for the slide to be removed, please, so that I could share mine? Thank you very much. So thank you, Chair, and good morning and afternoon to all. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm also delighted to see these very important bodies working together and organizing a dialogue. So as a scene setter for this session, I have prepared 3 slides with one key idea in each only that illustrate both the complexity, but also the interconnectedness of the components on the issue which is in front of us, which is pollution from marine plastic. So first, this is really a fast-track issue profile. It seems that every time we hear about marine plastic and the new assessment of plastic occurrence or concentration or behavior of plastic is being published, it is harder truth that is coming to us with more difficult facts to deal with. And so as an example, the last report from the Pew Charitable Trust, which relied on a massive amount of data that was compiled in very large computers, concluded that if we continue business as usual, we'll end up from 11 million ton today to 29 million ton by 2040 of marine plastics. Which they represent as, which is visually quite powerful, as about 50 kilos of plastic per meter of coastline. And they say even if we tightened this relationship between industry and government, which is already the existing commitment, in fact, it would only be a dent because the decrease in marine plastics would only be 7% by 2040. And we would have 4 billion people without organized waste collection. So this is quite a sobering projection. So what I'm going to share with you is the approach we took when a group of us from the Scientific Advisory Committee to the process under the United Nations Environment Assembly on assessment of pollution from marine plastic discussed the assessment of risks from this pollution. And so this is the way we examined it. So first we looked at plastic cycle. And the question at each stage that can result to plastic pollution, as at each stage, we have contribution to marine plastic. So you think about pre-production and then the production with raw and industrial processing and then different use in a very large number of sectors. And then there's the trade time that might be transport by sea, where again, there can be occurrence of pollution. And then we have the post-use and the waste management issues that have been raised already, and which are a very important consideration and concern in Southeast Asia. So the second consideration is the size of this plastic. It comes in all sizes. As we know, it can come in large size and gets fragmented into micro sizes and nano sizes. It can even come in micro sizes from the sewage directly. Small pieces of plastic are assimilated by different organisms, marine organisms, that then will transform it into nanoplastics. Where is it found? It's found everywhere. We know now that, of course, it's in a lot of rivers and it ends up in the ocean, but it's also on the beach, it's on the seabed, it's in the water column, it's on all the oceans, it's in marine life, it's even in plankton, and all through the food chain. So what are the risks? We've already heard some of the risks, and certainly the economic risks are highlighted and now are being measured as being greater and greater. The human health risk has been now characterized. There's a social risk. There's a very important ecosystem risks at marine ecosystem risk at many levels. And then to make matters worse, these risks are compounded with existing risk from climate change, with ocean acidification, extreme events, and other sources of pollution from anthropogenic activities. So this leads me to the second important idea, which is that the international and to present the international and regional legal and policy framework, which is in place to tackle pollution from marine plastic. First, if we look at international level, at the center, the UN and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, our constitution for the ocean, and a number of bodies and mechanisms that look at marine plastics in general. I can't name them all, or indeed I would certainly be interrupted by the chair. Still at international level, we have other bodies. So we have mechanisms and regulation that deals with particular aspects of pollution from marine plastics, waste and chemicals, shipping, but also fisheries such as lost nets. We also have conservation treaties that also worry about the impact of plastics on the species or areas or subsets of the marine environment that they seek to protect. And this process at the international level extends at regional level. So here we see first the more general bodies that look at marine plastic pollution and extend the international legal framework. Very importantly, we also have, that just appeared on the screen, the regional center on chemical and waste, which is very important for the region, and is starting to do quite a bit of work with different countries in the region. We, very importantly, have the ASEAN. The ASEAN, with all its numerous bodies, working groups and activities that are looking at pollution from marine plastics. And we have many more that, again, I just want to illustrate this so that I hope that the picture that is now set up is clear, is that it is a very complex network. And some say it's fragmented. Yes, indeed, it is fragmented. But what is really important to see is that each part of this network actually has a different mandate, and everyone plays a complementary role. So it takes all of these parts together to combat pollution from marine plastic. We are still learning in improving these coordination mechanisms. This leads me to the third idea, which is now a snapshot of a representation of the actors in the production of plastic and response to plastic pollution. We all need to work together to rein in pollution from marine plastics. So you see here a selection of countries. It's only a small number of the relevant one, of course, because this is just an extract from a database that I'm still exploring, and I was trying to see what we could get with it. So what you see there in green, the green circles that you see within each of the countries are the research institutions, such as the universities I work for, that you find several of, looking at different aspects of marine plastic in the various countries. In red, you have government bodies from different parts of government working on pollution from marine plastic. In blue, you have civil societies and non-governmental organization, and in gray, the industry, with whom none of the plastic cycle can change. So I hope that these slides have set the stage by highlighting the complexity and the importance of dialogue such as this one. We need to bring the actors, networks, or flows of exchange to stop and the entry of plastic into the ocean. And so our very important mission that we've already started work on, but we need to continue and build on, is tightening cooperation mechanisms at all levels, and of course at regional level. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Una. Thanks for that brief overview. Thanks for being diligent about time. And I think that's a very useful place to start this discussion, partly a recognition of the fact that there is a wealth of existing bodies, processes, institutions in place at the national level and certainly at the regional and global level. There's a lot of opportunity in working through these synergistically, leveraging effectively. And as you say, there's still a lot to learn about how to do that best. And perhaps that's where the key to policy coherence and effective action lies. So with that, thank you, Una, and let's move forward with the panel discussion. And at this point, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our panelists. We have an excellent set of speakers that you see on screen before you. And let me briefly let you know who they are. Dr. Suri Satapumin is a marine resources management specialist at the Department of Marine and Coastal Resources at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Thailand. So this is a very senior level position within the department. Suri has a PhD in marine biology. She's working as a Thai government official since 1989. And she has, over the last many years, been a very central person in setting marine litter on the ASEAN agenda, including through organization of the ASEAN Conference on Reducing Marine Debris in 2017. And organization of the special ASEAN ministerial meeting on marine debris in 2019. We have Dr. Thadin T, the Director General of the Vietnam Administration of Seas and Islands in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. Prior to serving as Director General, Dr. Tarinti was Director of Department of Personnel and Organization within the Ministry, and as Vice Chief of Office in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. Ms. Christine Hughes is the Director of the Global Plastic Action Partnership and a member of the Executive Committee of the World Economic Forum. The Global Plastic Action Partnership is a public-private partnership aimed at eradicating plastic waste and pollution, focusing on circular economy solutions. Christine has worked for more than 20 years representing companies as well as governments, driving complex global programs focusing on sustainability, economic development, public policy and stakeholder engagement. Excuse me, Mr. Roper Sit, the Assistant to the Ministry of Environment in Cambodia, has been employed by the ministry since 1994, mainly in environmental education and also working on a number of types of pollution, including persistent organic pollutions, including marine pollution. And since 2019, he is in his current position of assistant within the ministry. He's got a Master of Science in Maritime Administration and Environmental Protection from the World Maritime University in Malmö, Sweden. And last and certainly not least, Mr. Tatsuya Abe, Deputy Director in the Office of Marine Environment of the Ministry of Environment of Japan. Abe-san has worked for the Ministry of Environment since 2010, involved in a range of environmental issues, including pollution from transport, environmental impact assessment, and management of sewage. So with that, we have a excellent set of panelists, and without any further ado, I think I would like to go to the first question, which I will direct at Kunsuri. Welcome to the dialogue. Kunsuri, the Bangkok Declaration on Combating Marine Debris in the ASEAN region and the ASEAN Framework for Action on Marine Debris are two foundation documents in this region. They play a key role in ensuring coherent and coordinated policies and actions. What are the key challenges in aligning all the different regional initiatives? Kunsuri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jürgen, for your introductions, and thank you very much for having me join this panel as representative from the ASEAN Working Group on Coastal and Marine Environment, or the AWGCME. And based on the two outcome documents as mentioned in your question, the AWGCME, with the support from the World Bank, has developed a draft regional action plan for combating marine debris in ASEAN region. And the draft is now in its finalizing stage for further endorsement and adoption in the ASEAN formality. Through the draft developing process, we found some key challenges in aligning national implementations and the regional initiative as follows. First, to solve the marine plastic pollution in a systematic way, we need to ensure that regional actions cover all elements of the waste value chain. First, reducing input into the system. Second, enhancing collection and minimizing leakage. And third, creating value for waste reuse. This is a huge task, but we see this is the opportunity to review on who is doing what in each country, as well as to understand their approaches at national level. Second, as a result of the review process, we found diverse policies and activities implementing at national level, as this is another challenge. To put into regional approach, we follow the ASEAN framework of action to categorizing national policies and activities. Third, levels of existing national strategies are different. Some have developed action plans, some have roadmaps, and some have order or acts. Such challenges can be overcome through the regional guidance on policy support and planning rather than too specific on what level of strategy should be done. Phasing out single-use plastic can be an example. Apart from the policy issue, challenge also cover scientific methodologies to assess and monitor marine debris in natural waters and ecosystem. To implement at regional level, the methods are to be harmonized so that the data are comparable. A database on the amount of marine debris hotspots as well as the leakage of plastic waste into the ocean is needed. Next slide, please. The regional action plan represents the collective inputs from the ASEAN member states over a series of workshops involving stakeholders in ASEAN, as well as development partners, private sectors, and academics. In order to enable the possibility for coordinated actions, we proposed 14 regional actions aiming at addressing a variety of plastic issues along with the plastic waste chain and are categorized according to the full framework of actions as shown in this slide. And this is where I stop, and I hope I did answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kunturi, for this overview of ASEAN framework and the efforts in the context of that. And we will come back to you with a follow-up question and a bit of discussion later, but I think this is a very good time to move to the next speaker, specifically on your point about the variety of national frameworks and the state of national planning. So Dr. Thalinthi, how is Vietnam's National Action Plan for Management of Marine Litter and the National Strategy on Integrated Solid Waste Management contributing to enhancing policy coherence across all different levels of government? Director Thalinthi, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary Tamerlander, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. About the question, it's a very interesting how the National Action Plan contribute to enhance the policy coherence across all levels of the government. We know that the National Action Plan on Marine Plastic Debris Management by 2030, we set the goal by 2020 to reduce plastic waste and collection by 50% and to prevent the use of the single-use best product and non-biodegradable plastic bags in 80% of coastal tourist area. And by 2030 to reduce plastic waste by around 70% and as reduced by 100%. To assess status go every 5 years for 11 main rivers and 12 island districts around the country. Here for our action plan, we give the 5 major solutions. Number 1, the communication to raise awareness and change behavior towards the plastic products and marine plastic debris. Second, collection, separation, storage, transportation, and disposal of plastic waste and garbage from coastal and marine activities. Third one, source plastic waste control for international cooperation, scientific research, application development, and transfer of marine plastic debris treatment technologies. Fifth, survey, review, research, and develop a mechanism for managing marine plastic debris and ensure its conformity, consistency, effectiveness, and efficiency. And for the National Strategy for Integrated Management of Solid Waste, we set the main targets here by 2025, using 100 eco-friendly plastic bags in trade centers and supermarkets for domestic purpose as a substitute for non-biodegradable plastic bags. And 80% of daily solid waste generated in rural residential area is collected and collected, stored, and transported south-treated and central treated to meet environmental protection requirement. And you know, here we mention a basic task and solution. Number one, building a socialization model in collecting, transporting, storing, and domestic solid waste. And second, raising awareness and responsibility of community on prevention, reduction, reuse, recycling, and treatment of solid waste, forming an environmentally friendly lifestyle. And thus, complete the system of legal document and mechanism and policy waste management. Actually, National Assembly just approved the new law on environmental protection. We have one article on, the plastic waste management. And first one, here to strengthen scientific research, modernize technology, and produce solid waste recycling and treatment equipment. Next slide. And conformity in implementation policy as government levels. Here, one of the goals of National Action Plan on Marine Plastic Debris Management contribute to successful implementation of National Strategy for Integrated Management of Waste, Solid Waste to 2025 with a vision to 2050. Thus, ensuring the consistency and efficiency of state management on environmental production, pollution control caused by solid waste and plastic waste. And content of National Action Plan on Plastic Waste Management focus on minimizing generation of plastic waste in coastal areas. The national strategy focus on minimizing on environmental pollution caused by solid waste, therefore creating synchronization in minimizing marine plastic waste from continental sources. And National Action Plan and National Strategy is complementary and consistent to increase awareness and effectively implementing the storing program, domestic solid waste and source. Okay, Sasso, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tadinti, for those words, and very good point made within the plans here around awareness raising and creating knowledge around the role of different stakeholders and certainly the general public in any successful and effective plastic pollution prevention effort. Without any further ado, I would like to invite the next panelist to speak. So Ms. Christine Hughes, Director of a Global Plastic Action Partnership. how can global multi-stakeholder partnerships like the GPAP help coordinated and effective solutions to reduce marine plastics pollution? Please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tamlander, and huge thanks also to the OECD and the Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment for inviting me to join you today. It was really lovely to see Dr. Nani deliver the keynote. She's been instrumental to our efforts in Indonesia, so really lovely panel creation. My name is Kristen Hughes. I have the honor of leading the Global Plastic Action Partnership, a multi-stakeholder platform aimed at shaping a more sustainable and inclusive world through the eradication of plastic pollution. We currently have 3 national partnerships, and I'm really honored to share this page with 2 of them today. The government of Indonesia, on which I'll focus the answer, and Vietnam, where we will officially launch our partnership next week. So thank you for inviting me. As many people know, we've heard already a number of statistics today, so I won't go into too much of the data, but plastic pollution and waste is not just a global challenge, but it is a national challenge that pretty much every country on the planet is trying to deal with. And one of the things that we've been really impressed by is hearing from Dr. Nani even, and from the University of Singapore, we were hearing some of these statistics. Oh, thank you. We could go to the second slide, please. You see a number of statistics eventually here on perhaps, but also Dr. Nani pointed out that the government of Indonesia has accepted, here we go. So you see a few of these very, very grueling statistics specifically focused on Indonesia's plastic waste flows. And this was captured through a baseline assessment that we delivered for the government of Indonesia a little bit over a year ago. And but what we really appreciate is how the government of Indonesia is addressing this. They're accepting these numbers, and they are really setting very bold targets to reduce plastic pollution 70% by 2025. Under Minister Luhut and the Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment, a minister-level task force and an operational level task force was established to implement this bold national target. And so to your question around multi-stakeholder approaches, we've worked with the Global Plastic Action Partnership, worked with the ministry to help form a platform of various leaders in the country, so private sector, other ministries, civil society, academics, and others, to launch the Indonesia Plastic Action Partnership. Next slide, please. The National Plastic Action Partnership then was launched in 2019 to support the government's work. And this comes into that play, your question around how do we operate as multi-stakeholder approach to address this issue? And really what it takes is leadership from the government, but then also working with private sector and civil society to consult and coordinate in trying to support the government to address their goals. So the National Plastic Action Partnership's mission is to act as a delivery platform to convene and collaborate in finding solutions across a number of different issues and to pull together all these various stakeholders to address them together. The platform supports the government in achieving a reduction in 3 main pillars: building a community, creating clear analysis of the situation, and then translating what the government could do to reduce plastics by taking specific action, which we're seeing already in the National Plastic Action Partnership through the variety of task forces. So as mentioned a moment ago, we initially ran a baseline analysis, and then earlier this year, April 2020, just after the rise of COVID, Indonesia launched a multi-stakeholder action plan, which would reduce radically the plastic pollution by taking 5 key system changes. And that's reduction, substitution, collection, disposition, and recyclability. So really focusing on 5 main areas, but then trying to implement those again through this multi-stakeholder approach. So it's not all just on the government, but how can private sector, how can development banks, how can academics also support? So we've now then created 5 task forces that are focused on funding, metrics, behavior change, innovation and policy. And then those are now separately operating. Again, I think Dr. Nani mentioned the Finance Task Force, which has recently launched its Finance Action Plan, which will really help to try to connect where finance is needed to bring those commitments and the actions to life. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for the question, and we welcome further questions and engagement today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Christine Hughes, and thank you for a very impressive initiative and for emphasizing some elements that will also be discussed here in this dialogue, including in relation to financing and leveraging partnerships with financing institutions, investment entities, and twinning that effectively with policy frameworks and the innovation that's required to address the challenges. We are running a little bit behind schedule, so I will swiftly move on to the next panelist, Mr. Rod Sith, Assistant to the Ministry of Environmental Cambodia. How can intergovernmental mechanisms, multilateral environmental agreements, the Mekong River Commission and others, how can they contribute to preventing marine plastic pollution in this region? The floor is yours, please go ahead.
Thank you, moderators. So first of all, I would like to thank the OECD and government of Indonesia for co-hosting these important events. So to begin with, the multilateral agreements that Cambodian party to, I would like to address that Cambodia has been enjoys the economic growth very strongly, and we become the low middle country in 2015. And add on with the COVID-19 pandemics, that Cambodia also facing another challenges in terms of the use of the single plastics, such as mask and glove, etc. This is alarm that for Cambodian that urgent handling of the such plastic waste with environmentally sound management and COs. So to fulfill this mandate, that's the Ministry of Environment, has been what have been developed the foreign strategy that one, we would like to institutionalize modernization. Second, we focus on the biodiversity conservation and natural resources protection. And third, we focus on the environmental protection. And last, we focus on the sustainable development. This is the main strategy that Ministry of Environment focusing on. Nevertheless, the Cambodian has also issued a number of regulations to address the plastic waste management, such as the digitalization of the power and responsibility to sub-national levels for the strengthening the solid waste management in 2015, and also we're taking another step in plastic reduction by regulating the importation, the production, and distribution of the use of plastic bag. And also we impose a small charge for the purchasing of the plastic bag at the supermarket in 2017. In addition to this, with the intention of the achieving of the sustainable development goals, the Ministry of Environment has been cooperative with the relevant stakeholders for the development partners to prepare the legal framework, strategic plan, and technical guideline to play an active role in the achieving these goals, including the sound management of plastic. Cambodia also establishes a plastic task force to focus on the 4R, as well as the framework for providing solutions to the country plastic problems. Since then, the task force focused on the 3 priority areas. First, the policy and regulatory review on the plastic. Second, the plastic waste communication and outreach. And the third, the business development and supports. Ladies and gentlemen, in joining hands with the international communities, Cambodia also became a party to a number of multilateral environmental agreements, such as the London Dumping Conventions. Next slide, please. Yeah. And also with the member to the MAPO conventions, the Basel Convention, the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutant, etc. Moreover, for the Mekong regions, the MRC, with support from the UNEP, has been conducted a project on promoting the countermeasures against the marine plastic litter in Southeast Asia, the so-called countermeasure projects that aim to identify the sources of plastic waste linkage and the development of a standardized methodology for the plastic waste assessment and monitoring in the Mekong rivers. The MOE, the MRC through Cambodian National Mekong Commissions also planning to carry out a review of the status and trends of the plastic waste management in Cambodia in 2021 and to develop a concept note for a long-term and cost-effective assessment and monitoring methodology in riverine plastic debris pollution in the Mekong rivers. At the Asian context, at the Asian frameworks, Cambodian also endorsed the Bangkok Declaration on combating marine debris in the Asian regions and the Asian Framework for Actions on Marine Debris. Therefore, from 2021 onward, the Ministry of Environment will work with the World Bank to develop a legal framework on plastic waste management by imposing economic instruments, restrictions, and ban single use of plastic products. We will also continue working with our partners, such as the ASEAN communities, the COBSEA, the OECD, the FFI, the PMC, GNEP, UNDP, and other development countries, etc., to address the environmentally sound waste management, including the plastics. In conclusion, Cambodia is interested and ready to join hands with all development partners via bilateral or multilateral collaboration for environmentally sound management of plastic waste. So this is a Cambodian effort for future development. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Also for a reminder of the range of different international policy frameworks and processes that are actually very relevant in this context, and for the reminder of the fact that data need to cover all aspects of marine plastic pollution, including the means by which it ends up in the marine environment, it leaks from, and so on. These are critical points when talking about data interoperability or data coherence. And that is what I would like to discuss with our last panelist here, Mr. Tatsuya Abe, Deputy Director at the Office of the Marine Environment, Ministry of Environment of Japan. Abe-san, how can data and monitoring better inform policy decision making? And what is Japan doing in this domain? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Toranya, and thank you again, and all organizers and secretaries for giving me a good, wonderful opportunity for on our initiatives. My name is Tatsuya Abe from Ministry of the Environment, Japan, and then I'd like to introduce our initiative for against marine precipitation in the world. At first, I'd like to introduce again our global common vision. It is essential to share and for the worldwide common long-term vision for the good measurements. In last year, Japan led proposed the common global vision, the ESCAP Blue Ocean Vision. The vision aims to reduce the additional pollution by marine plastic litter to zero by 2050. And the G20 leaders shared this vision at the G20 summit in last year. Now the 86 countries and regions have already shared this vision, includes the ESCAP member countries and the ASEAN countries. At the same time, the G20 member countries established the G20 implementation framework in order to achieve the ESCAP Blue Ocean Vision. The implementation framework requires the member states to share and the update on the each action policies and countermeasures. In addition, we think that the ASEAN countries is the very important partners against the marine plastic debris. So the Japan started the ASEAN Plus 3 marine plastic debris cooperation action initiatives, and the ASEAN countries work on it. This initiative includes the three main topics. At first, the improved management of marine waste, and 3 Rs, reduce, reuse, recycles. These topics include the energy recovery for the synergy of climate change action and protection of marine environment. The second topic is to promote awareness, research, and education on marine plastic debris. At last, third topic is strengthening regional and international cooperation. Uh, this topic includes the establishing the regional knowledge hub. In action, in last year, Japan established the regional knowledge center in Jakarta for sharing the knowledge and experience of the ASEAN countries. The initiative, as the initiative mentioned at the second point, the science knowledge is a very essential and important thing for the science-based and more efficient policy making. Especially the harmonized monitoring and data sharing of distribution of marine plastic data is a very important thing. So the Japan held the G20 workshop in this September. At the workshop, approximately 160 persons participated from 31 countries, including the 6 ASEAN countries. At the workshop, we discussed a little purpose of harmonized monitoring and data sharing, such as understanding the current status, estimation of the negative impacts, identification of the source and hotspots, prediction of the pollution, development of measures and variation of their effectiveness, and establish a target and milestones for reducing marine plastic deaths. In addition, Japan government proposed a new monitoring data sharing project and this at the workshop. Now there is not the global monitoring data sharing systems in the world. So Japan want to develop and monitoring data sharing in the world and connect the existing lot of initiatives. Through these initiatives, we want to promote the science-based policy making. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, and for a range of efforts addressing some of these priorities that arise from international dialogue on marine litter and plastic pollution, including international agreements on this. This brings us to the end of the first round of reflections by our panelists. And again, as mentioned before, we're running quite late, but I do want to give you all an opportunity to react to one more question each. So I'm going to have to ask you to be very, very brief in your responses, 1 to 2 sentences only, if possible. So I will ask you each a follow-up question. before we then invite our discussants to take the floor to also provide some interventions. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for general discussions where participants can also raise questions. In the interest of time, perhaps you may also want to type questions into the chat box, and maybe I can ask for some assistance from co-organizers to pick out particularly relevant questions that arise that way. Going back to you, Kunsuri, in one or two sentences only, how can international and regional partners best support you in the implementation of the declaration and the framework? Please go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, Jörg. Just one or two sentences. Just give me a quick shot. Well, actually, the next step after our regional action plan is endorsed and adopted at the ministerial level on environment, we plan for the implementation, and that is grouped into three phases. The first one is the pre-implementation phase that consists of the institutional setup, resource mobilization, communications and coordination strategy, as well as the baseline development. And the second phase is onto the implementation, such as to establish the ASEAN Cross-Sectoral Coordination Task Force on Marine Debris, ASEAN Joint Advisory Group on Marine Debris and Circular Economy, ASEAN Centers for Marine Debris and Circular Economies, and also the Regional Action Plan Monitoring Unit. And in phase 3 is on the monitoring, reporting, and evaluation. And out of those three phases, the pre-implementation phase is the most critical step to kick off actions towards achieving the objectives of the action plan by 2025. And then in short, support from partners can be grouped into three areas according to the implementation plan I just mentioned. First is on technical support. Second is on the financial support. And the third area is on coordination and capacity support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And apologies to have to press you all to be very brief on topics where we can speak a long time. But that is the nature of these meetings, unfortunately. Thank you, Kunsuri. Director General Tadin T, the government of Vietnam, how are you involving subnational governments in executing your action plans for managing marine plastic litter? And what is the main challenge in relation to that? The main challenge to vertical coordination? Please go ahead. Director Tadin T, I see you still muted. Okay, let's see if we can come back to him in a little while. Oh, I see. Please go ahead. The floor is yours. We can't hear you. At least I can't.
Share screen.
The sound is very faint.
Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you can speak up a little bit, and please be very brief in the interest of time.
To develop action plan on marine plastic debris management by 2030 at the localities, the coastal province and cities propose the implementation tasks and solutions is based on the national action plans on marine plastic waste management with specific goals by 2025 and 2030. Adjust in accordance with local conditions. Besides, the localities have implementation many initiatives and movement to classify, correct, recycle, and treat plastic waste and use environmentally friendly materials, raising public awareness about using disposable plastic. During implementation of the National Action Plan on Marine Plastic Waste Management at the local level, we have some advantage. One, coordinations and guidance for the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in developing and implementation in the action plan in the locality. Two, support from domestic and international organizations in the implementations of programs and projects related to marine plastic waste. However, we have some difficulties. First, only 11 out of 28 central provinces and cities have issued the local action plans, leading to less the synchronizations in management because plastic waste is an inter-regional and inter-local issues. Two, lack of background data in the current status of plastic waste to assess the effectiveness of the local action plan implementations. And three, lack of human resource and financial mechanism to help the plastic waste localities. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And apologies for technical glitches. I'm happy we could hear that because they were very, very important points that I assume are also shared to some extent across other countries of the region. Thank you so much for that. Christine Hughes, how is the Global Plastic Action Partnership helping translating commitment to pollution and waste into concrete action in this region? Please go ahead.
Yeah, and I can be very brief. As I mentioned before, the way that we're trying to support organizations, both governments and companies, to turn their commitments into action is really utilizing what we call our three-pillar approach. So the first, for governments, we're helping to design these action roadmaps by first analyzing the plastic waste flows and creating an assessment of exactly understanding the analysis of what it will take to actually address it. So there's evidence-based approaches that help the governments to turn their commitments into direct action. For others, for corporates, for civil society, etc., we've curated platforms at the national level that allows the sharing of best practices, collaboration, building on others' examples and that sort of organization to go at this. It's such a monumental issue. We're working to bring everybody together to ensure that it's a very collaborative approach. And yes, everybody can have their own individual commitments, but we're working to bring all of these players together such that those commitments can be turned into action.
Thank you so much for that and for being very brief. Mr. Roth-Seth, what are the main challenges to enhance coordination between measures to address land-based as well as sea-based sources of plastic pollution? Please go ahead.
Well, for Cambodia cases, we have a number of challenges in terms of this from the capacity building, from this institutional management, as well as financial assistance and resources available, and also infrastructure for this effectiveness of solid waste management. And also the public participation in the sound handling of plastic solid waste and plastic, and also another challenges. And furthermore, is the legal frameworks that we have a limited legal framework that address the single-use plastic and other plastic containing in product. To overcome such challenges, then Cambodian will work in two different levels. One at the the intergovernmental level that the Ministry of Environment will work with the Ministry of Interior to decentralize powers on the solid waste management to the subnational levels. And also with the Ministry of Economic and Finance, we will impose the levy of plastic and also ban the importation of plastic and also of plastic waste, as well as we will restriction on the import of some plastic material or plastic item to be used in Cambodia. And the Ministry of Environment with other line ministry, we will conduct the public awareness raising on the sound handling of plastic waste, as well as the promotion of these CO principles. In terms of the cooperation between the development partners and other countries, then of course Cambodia with this FFI, we will develop the legal framework on the marine litters that we plan to conduct next year. And also with support from the World Bank, we will develop this another national policies and also regulatory framework on this single-use plastics that we focus on the top 10 plastic items. And also with the MRC, that Cambodia will conduct another study on the status of the marine plastic leakage, as well as to collect other data for the further sharing information with the region for combating the plastic from the Mekong River regions. And also with the other partner like UNDP, UNEP, and other like the COBSEA, PMC, etc., and also OECD, we will also conduct the enhancement of awareness raising on the plastic crisis and also the solutions among the citizens and also private sector for the sound, the environmental management, as well as environmental education, awareness raising, and finally the environmental campaign to clean up the plastic. And last but not least, we will continue working with our partners such as the ASEAN communities, the COBSEA, the FFI, the PMC, UNEP, UNDP, and also other development partners to address environmental sound management, including plastic within the region as well as in the world. Thank you. That's from Cambodian perspective. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And then I turn again to Abe with a very brief follow-up question. How can frameworks like the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision help in coordinating action? How can it leverage border action in the region? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to point at the 2 points. At first, as the rest of other participants mentioned, the strengthening the solid waste management is a very key issue. As you know, Japan has a lot of knowledge and experiences of strengthening the solid waste management, and we want to cooperate and provide our knowledge for the Southeast Asian countries. Especially, as I mentioned, we established the regional knowledge center in Jakarta in last year, and we want to share our knowledge and other countries' knowledge. As a second point, also, as I mentioned, we established the G20 implementation framework for sharing and updating the planned actions and countermeasures against marine plastic issue. So this implementation framework could have the synergy with the ASEAN framework and Bangkok Declaration. So we'd like to provide the international mutual learning and review of the achieving and developing of the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And with this, I want to thank all of our lead panelists here, as well as UNA, for their valuable contributions, and swiftly move us on to the last second to last segment of this session, we have a few additional discussants that I will invite to take the floor to give a few brief remarks, their reflections on what has been presented so far and their views on the path forward. So I will introduce you one by one and simply request you to give your 1 to 2 minute intervention. Starting with Ms. Toto Han, the Deputy Director of Natural Resources Conservation at the Environmental Conservation Department of the Ministry of National Resources and Environment of Myanmar. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. The evidence-based policy is very essential. Myanmar is one of the top 20 countries in terms of mismanaged plastic, with the quantities of marine plastic debris up to 0.07 to 0.18 million metric tons per year, according to GEMPEC. And also the ARB, this is one of our major river, is the 50th polluting rivers in Asia and discharge more than 0.03 million metric tons per year into the ocean, according to the Liberation. The majority of the plastic found in the river is likely to be mismanaged plastic waste. Since the key source of marine debris is plastic, Myanmar National Waste Management Strategy and Master Plan list plastic as one of the priority waste stream and generally promote a 3R approach. In this regard, plastic policy option and a roadmap has been developed with the technical assistance of the World Bank through the survey and assessment of product alternative for the top 10 priority plastic items leaking into the environment in Myanmar. But there are gaps and challenges in implementing plastic waste management in order to combat marine debris. Therefore, Myanmar is developing a national plastic action plan with the technical assistance of the World Bank, MOEJ, and ADB. As you are aware, it is difficult to develop evidence-based policy to tackle marine litter issue without the available and reliable data. Therefore, we will identify activities to generate knowledge on the plastic pollution and microplastic in Aari River by participating in the countermeasure to regional project, which is conducted by UNEP with the assistance of MOEJ to get the overview of the plastic pollution issue of the Aari River in Myanmar. Also, we also plan the drone survey with the remote sensing technology for the plastic diagnosis study in Yangon, and then the other 3 cities from the Delta region, Hilly region, and the central part of Myanmar. And then the Ministry of Environment Japan will support the Myanmar in target setting based on the secondary and primary data collection and training on monitoring method for floating litters and marine debris and marine microplastic. By doing so, these surveys and data collection activity, I believe that Myanmar can set a target to reduce the marine debris, and Myanmar National Plastic Action Plan will be developed with the assistance of the development partners such as World Bank, MOEJ, UNEP, and ADB as the evidence-based policy. And so Myanmar believes the more collaboration, attention, and resources are needed to combat marine debris. So Myanmar is willing to explore cooperation with more international partners and to equally contribute to more robust global efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that information and for the systematic approach that you're reflecting that Myanmar is taking with the support of development partners. With this, I would like to invite Mr. Peter Berke of the OECD Environment Directorate. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for having me here. Clearly, a lot has already been said, and it's really impressive to see how much is going on in Southeast Asia in this particular area. So let me make really just a few additions and maybe emphasize a few points that have been made. Clearly in the OECD's experience to address marine plastic litter, policy interventions are needed all along the life cycle of plastics, and ideally as close as possible to the source. But all interventions really are needed upstream and downstream of the life cycle. And these interventions need to be coherent, of course, between themselves. Let me, take the example of microplastics, which is maybe something that has been, less discussed in this panel so far. Microplastics is the invisible part of the marine plastic litter issue, and it represents around 1/3 of the volume of marine plastics that enter the oceans. And many of these occur during the use phase. We're just in the process of developing a report on this matter, and it really looks at all sources of marine of microplastics from along the life cycle of textiles and tires, and identifies the different mitigation measures that are available at different stages of the life cycle. And I think what comes out very clearly is that there are important interventions upstream at the design stage and at the production stage of textiles and tires that are available, but that clearly require a lot of international cooperation and coordination to be addressed, because these products are usually designed for global markets. But also downstream, I think we see a need for, in particular, policy coherence also with a wastewater management or water management sector. In particular, there are opportunities to filter out microplastics through wastewater treatment plants. Finally, let me just highlight that we're continuing to work beyond microplastics. Of course, we are now in the process of developing a global plastics outlook, which will project key trends to 2050 and identify effective policy mixes to address plastic pollution that comes from plastics production and use, and will also put a spotlight on particular issues such as markets for recycled plastics, trade in waste plastics, and innovation towards greener plastics. So thank you for this.
Thank you for that, and for again bringing up this topic of microplastics. That obviously is an important part of the puzzle. So with that, I would like to invite our next discussant, Ms. Maria Corazon Barvia from PEMSI, the Partnerships in Environmental Management. Please go ahead.
Okay, so as the problems of plastic waste are mounted, we all became aware of these direct consequences, the ecological impact of marine plastic pollution, and it's been well known and documented. But what is often evading attention are the financial considerations. And there are few studies that have explored the topic of marine plastic pollution costs. And these externality costs have not been adequately measured, and such studies can be used to identify which aspects of plastic problems seem most acute in an objective and quantitative manner. So the pollution is creating severe economic impact on local governments tasked with the waste collection and treatment and coastal cleanup, but have limited capacity and funds, as well as on industries linked to the blue economy, especially the fisheries, aquaculture, and tourism. So the costs arising from potential cleanup activities are the largest contributor to the overall economic damage. So ideally, a responsible, well-established waste management infrastructure would allow for waste collection, transportation, sorting, processing, and recycling in a way that keeps plastic from ending up in the river or in the ocean, Unfortunately, this is a standard that many developing countries are not just meeting, but there are opportunities for improvement across the entire waste management value chain. But there are too many gaps in the current waste management infrastructure. And the second cause is related to the coastal and marine tourism. So tourists can be turned off by health and safety risks. A reduction in tourism activity has cascading effect like loss of tourism associated livelihood. So the tourism development strategy must also be accompanied by sustainable waste management and the overall environmental management strategy. A third cause is on the fisheries and aquaculture industry. So plastic waste can harm the fishery reserves. It can also harm the survival rates of fish larvae in aquaculture industry. And of course, the plastic waste can result in the degradation of local ecosystems and marine biodiversity, and therefore the loss of ecosystem services. So studies on this environmental damage assessment can be used in designing economic or market-based instruments, ranging from the tax instruments to incentives and rewards, which could complement and enhance the policies and action plans that are already being put in place. So the damage cost can provide the strong rationale to increase the investment in municipal and industrial waste management systems, in investing in developing alternatives to plastics, and to switching to non-plastic products. So like biodegradable plastics, but these are also energy intensive and expensive to produce. So we have to really transition towards a circular economy and of course take a personal responsibility to significantly limit our use of plastic. So the most effective way to have less plastic in the ocean is to use less plastic in the first place, to recycle and reduce waste. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, and of course, a very valuable reminder there. Lastly, I would like to invite Mr. Emil Dardak, who, excuse me, I have to consult my notes. Emil Dardak is the Vice Governor of East Java Province in Indonesia. Please go ahead. You have the floor, and I'm very happy to have a perspective from subnational government in this discussion. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Very briefly, I think we're talking about plastics as well as microplastic debris. And in our province, which we have 40 million population, and we are the second largest economy in Indonesia. Of course, definitely the human activities would result in the generation of significant amount of waste. About 12.74% of our waste actually are plastic. And this includes LDPE, PVC bottles, and PET bottles, styrofoam, and others. Now, the conventional way of managing plastic waste in particular has been the end-of-pipe approach, where basically we don't see waste as something that can be reduced. We don't see waste as a resource that can be economically utilized. And then we are now working on 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, and extended producer responsibility, which is basically an effort to reduce the generation of waste and also to basically ensure that we can minimize the amount of waste that needs to be piled up in the final dumping site by virtue of reusing them or recycling them. And in that manner, extended producer responsibility is a measure in which producers that utilize plastic packagings are held responsible as well for trying to improve the environment of recycling and reusing of the plastic waste that they generate through the consumers who consume their product and throw the waste, the plastic waste. And finally, the ultimate approach that we're working on is called the circular economy, which is basically, it starts with redesigning packagings to be more recyclable and reusable. We've issued a it's not a decree, but it's an open letter or note from the governor to encourage the less use of plastic bags, less use of plastic bottles, and shifting towards the use of tumblers and towards using their own shopping bags. And also, we would like to make we would like to reorient the people. When we talk about circular economy, we want to make sure that people don't only just look at waste per se. They need to be able to determine how their consumption pattern can result in waste. So it's not just about doing things after consumption, but being mindful about what they are consuming. Now, this is the behavioral change that we're trying to instill in the people, the 40 million people of East Java. And in so doing, to conclude, therefore, we have issued regulations and laws that support this idea. And of course, this includes integrating waste management in, it's no longer just the issue of the Office of Environment. It's also the issue for the Office of Education. It's also an issue for the Office of Small Medium Enterprises. They all need to integrate this environmental perspective and paradigm within their respective strategy. That's why we promote schools, including the use of diapers. We're working with the Japanese government and Japanese manufacturer Unicharm to use animation to make primary school students aware about the danger of throwing diapers into the rivers. So these are just examples of how we combine laws and regulations as policies, as well as also trying to make sure that people reorient their perspective, not just about what to do after consuming, but what to do even before deciding what to consume. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that perspective, and of course an excellent reminder of all the work that goes on at subnational level, the importance of work at the city and province level across this region, which shouldn't be underestimated. Your point about waste management is absolutely accurate, but equally so, leveraging this understanding and behavioral change among all groups of society is going to be crucial, irrespective of how the policy framework develops. Thank you for that. We are now very close to the end of this session, and I have been given a little bit of a lease of life for this session. We can eat into our upcoming coffee break with a few minutes so that we can take one or two questions from the floor to any of our presenters, panelists. So I will open it up for a brief specific questions, and if you can, please address them at one of our speakers. You may type them in the chat box, but I think it might be better at this point to raise your hand and state your question. So I open it up to you. Please go ahead if you want to seek clarification on anything that was presented so far. And while you think about that, I will also say I'm well aware that we are already eating into the coffee break, so I will close the session quite soon. But I do encourage you to take this opportunity and make your contribution to this discussion. Colleagues, I don't think I see any hands or any comments in the chat. So with that, I'm going to draw this discussion to a close. I'm not going to give a detailed wrap up. I don't want to do an injustice to the rich input that we have been given from presenters, panelists, from discussants. But I do think it's worth noting a few points that I feel came out quite strongly in these interventions. And one is, of course, the need for not just a whole of government, but also society-wide response. And several speakers have addressed topics overall or specific aspects of them. And I think in that respect, there's a very strong recognition of the need for coherence, and also a very clear reminder here that coherence does not have to mean identical. Things can be tailored to a great extent and remain coherent, whether that's vertical within a country, horizontal across sectors, or horizontal across a region. And I think we've seen in all the intervention an impressive range of actions and measures. We've seen an impressive cohesiveness in place on so many levels. And it's clear that some of that comes out of an ongoing exchange and a reflection of the situation and arriving at similar conclusions with respect to what priorities are and how they need to be addressed. And it's very important to maintain a focus on that. It is clear that it's very important to use the frameworks that we have in continuing to seek coherence, increased coherence, and the ASEAN framework, COBSEA's regional action plan on marine litter, as well as global processes are absolutely crucial in this regard. I think it's also clear that there's a very long way to go. So we are beginning to have a range of measures, a lot of efforts that are coherent on some levels, but they perhaps operate sometimes to an extent in relative isolation or without sufficient connectivity. So it's not yet clear to what extent the full range of measures are really leading to a system-wide change. And they are contributing, they are a foundation, but we haven't yet established a system-wide change that I think is required to successfully address plastic pollution and marine litter. The challenge here is, of course, that we have to deal with the problems of today while we are building the systems for the future. And we have to solve the problems of today with the systems we have, with the institutions we have. We have to build the systems for the future on that same foundation. And I guess it's a long way of saying leveraging existing frameworks and processes at all levels, at any level, is going to be crucial, because bypassing them will further add to complexity and undermine efforts of coherence that's so sorely needed, and the bit of effort that's so sorely needed in order to effectively address plastic pollution. And in that respect, I think without picking out too many specific examples, it is very important to note the importance of ASEAN in this region by virtue of being a broad economic community, a social, political, trading community, and so on. ASEAN spans all segments of society, and by effectively leveraging that, by working on that basis, many changes can be achieved. It's also very important to bear in mind the processes that are taking place globally. We heard a lot of interventions on the non-binding and partnership platforms, and I think we should also bear in mind the process under UN Environment Assembly, and the outcomes of that will be clearer by the time we reach UN Environment Assembly 5th session. But as things stand right now, there is gradual movement towards some form of global governance architecture related to marine litter and plastic pollution. And this will obviously be very important, including in terms of promoting policy coherence. And responses to that, the implementation of that, again, can probably be advanced most effectively on the basis of the frameworks that countries have already put in place. And lastly, from my side, I think many speakers also emphasized this issue of finance. Sufficient, broad enough, leveraging the full range of stakeholders in financing the change that needs to happen. And that financing needs to include accommodating short-term costs of implementing changes that are potentially challenging in order to reap the longer-term benefits of plastic pollution reduction and marine litter prevention. So those were my few main take-home messages. I am sure our report writers will do a better and more detailed job at that than I did. I think that's all we have time for now. And from my side, I would like to close it there. And Anthony, hand it back to you. Thank you so much again to all our panelists and discussants. It's been a real pleasure to have you in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jyrka, and thank you also to our distinguished panelists and to our discussants. It was a very rich and full session there. Really got us into the details of the challenges around the coordination and policy coherence dimension of our dialogue. We now have a coffee break before our next session, which will focus on finance and which I will be moderating. We have introduced a virtual networking exercise here where we can send participants into small virtual breakout rooms. If you're feeling social, have a chat with those in your room. If you feel the need for coffee, please go get some, or feel free to shut off your camera and microphone if you don't feel quite so social at this hour of the day. We will resume at 5 past the hour, wherever you are. So that's in about 10 minutes time. So Christina, let's head to the virtual breakout rooms now. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. My name is
actually being used by other fishermen. So, but we don't really have a scientific evidence saying that these nets are particularly from whatever country.
When we look at the supply chain, we find a lot of the nets are made in Korea. So that's something that we have a Korean scientist on board with us, and we're looking at identifying where it's from. And Korea actually gave fishermen money. If they would hand them some ghost nets, they would get money for it. So there was
fishing for marine debris instead of fishing
that's
for
right.
fish.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it works. You know, have you heard of the plastic bank? They were based in Vancouver. Do you know the people involved there?
Yeah.
They're interested in setting up, some sort of branches in different countries, and they're even in Timor-Leste. There's a small groups repurposing plastic. They'll buy it and shape it into handicrafts and this kind of thing. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, in Malaysia, there's kind of activities are actually being championed by our local NGOs.
Okay.
They really push for.
Okay, welcome back everyone to the dialogue. I hope that the breakout rooms, the virtual breakout rooms, were profitable to you all, and you all had a bit of a chance to have a chat as well as a catch up and have some coffee. It's my pleasure to now moderate this second session of the dialogue, which focuses on financing solutions to address marine plastics pollution. And we're very privileged to have a stellar cast of presenters and panelists and discussants. And without further ado, I'd just like to provide some background, some context for the session. We really, whenever we go to these kinds of events, we hear three things. One is that the best laid plans will never be implemented unless there is adequate finance. A second thing we often hear is that there is plenty of finance available out there, but where are the projects? And a third thing that we hear a lot is there is plenty of innovation in financing mechanisms, but how can we scale these up? So what I want to do in this session is to delve into these and to other questions.
And we are honoured to have a very distinguished panel to guide us through these questions. I will introduce the panel in a minute, but first of all, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, who will provide an overview to get us into the discussion. It's my great honour to introduce Bruce Dunn, who is the Director of Safeguards Division and Officer in Charge for the Environment Thematic Group in the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department of the Asian Development Bank. Bruce, I'll hand the floor over to you, and we look forward to your remarks. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anthony. And it's really great to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation to ADB. You've outlined some really great framing questions for this session, and I hope with this short intervention, I can give a little bit of light on some of those points. Just as I kick off, I'm just going to share my screen here. So I hope that will come through okay for you. Okay, just confirming, Anthony, has that come through okay for you? All right, thumbs up. So let's get started. So look, it was great listening to the earlier session around some of the real hard issues around plastics, and obviously the impacts of plastic pollution are continuing to really have a devastating impact on our marine environment. And of course, as we all struggle in the region with the COVID-19, this is also exacerbating in some ways plastic consumption with things like online shopping, takeaways, and the use of personal protective equipment. So, yet more challenges for our oceans, and it does make it, even more urgent than ever before that we, really find some solutions for marine plastic pollution. But in this session, what I wanted to talk about was finance, and what can we do to mobilize blue finance or ocean finance so that we can support healthy oceans and address marine plastic. So I'm going to briefly outline for you some of the context in terms of how ADB is approaching this, but I hope in a context that will also be more broadly applicable to others, for things that can be done or to shed light on various different approaches. So I'll just go to the next slide here. I hope that's coming through okay. All right. Okay, so what you're seeing here, and I firstly just wanted to give a little bit of context. So last year, ADB launched for the first time an action plan for healthy oceans. And this was really responding to critical issues like plastics and others that are facing the region. And at that time, our president committed to us mobilizing $5 billion to support healthy oceans from 2019 to 2024. And this is covering broadly three main areas of action: ecosystem management, pollution control, and sustainable coastal development. Now, obviously, if we're going to scale up to $5 billion, it's a big challenge for us, something we're committed to do, but how do we go about doing that? Now, we have developed as part of this program something we're calling our Ocean Finance Initiative, which at its core really aims to increase financial capital flows through to ocean health. And there's six main elements that I'm going to briefly run through. You can see on the graphic on the right-hand side of the screen, those elements. And these are all interrelated, but I just will very briefly run through a few key things which I think can frame some further discussions. So firstly, what really is the blue economy? What's a blue investment? So one of the things that we see is we actually suffer from a lack of universal definitions and standards to guide what is blue, what are blue investments. So to address this, we've been putting some work into developing a novel ocean financing framework which sets out selection criteria and indicators to guide ocean investments. And this is something that's quite important because there's obviously shades of blue, and we do want to make sure that we're focusing investments into some of the right areas. Happy to share this. It's something that we've now finalized and we can share through this meeting and afterwards. Second, though, and we just heard from Anthony on this, one of the issues is that ocean investments are constrained by a limited pipeline of bankable deals, bankable investments. This is certainly something that we see. So, we need to grow. We need to identify and scale up successful investments and, really build a pipeline that finance can flow into. And to support this, we're doing a number of things, including collaborating with the UN Environment Programme to study and identify some of the most viable blue economy sectors and also the right sorts of deal structures that can be used to finance those. So this is something that we'll have forthcoming next year. Third, to make those investments happen will also require a lot of innovation in terms of financial mechanisms. And these mechanisms need to leverage and also de-risk both public and private capital. Capital is not going to flow if there's a significant amount of risk in terms of, will these projects be successful? Will money be able to flow back to investors? And there's a range of tools and approaches that we're using, things like launching blue bonds, novel credit mechanisms, blue credits, and sustainability linked loans. And in a few minutes, I'll come to an example of one of those that we're working on in the ASEAN region. Then fourth, we obviously need to grow the total amount of finance available in the pool. And this can't just come from, development institutions. It needs to come from public sources, including domestic resource mobilization, supported by overseas development aid, as well as from private sources. And this includes things like impact investors, as well as mainstream financial institutions, which is, something we really need to bring online. And going back to the blue finance framework that I mentioned earlier in terms of what defines blue, we've actually been starting a dialogue with a number of mainstream financial institutions to get their portfolios to think about how they can finance blue and innovations in that space. Now, growing the pool of financing can do a couple of things. Obviously, you've got baseline investments that are already bankable that money can flow into. But as we said, many are not quite there. We need project incubation and we need de-risking. And so, there's a number of examples out there. We're going to hear later from the World Bank about their pro-blue work. And ADB is also working to create what we're calling an Oceans Partnership Facility, which ideally will crowd in partner funding through a defined approach. Now, fifth, governments need to systematically address perverse incentives. And this is something that's really driving the economy and not necessarily towards public goods. We need to create a fiscal enabling environment for the blue economy by aligning taxes and subsidies with ocean health. And I know this is work that OECD and others are thinking about. And then finally, to make all this possible, we need to be investing in building ocean health through financial partnerships. This is not something that, one institution or governments can do necessarily all on their own. There's a lot to be gained. And this is also from a financial perspective about sharing risks. And then this needs to be supported by capacity development and knowledge sharing, which is, clearly one of the reasons we're here today, which is fantastic. Now, moving, on to my next slide. I wanted to give you an example here, and something that we've been working on, over the last 2 years fairly intensively is called the ASEAN Catalytic Green Financing Facility, or ACGF for short. Now, this is an innovative financing vehicle established under the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund, which has been around for a while. Under this, ASEAN governments basically have been prepared to put in public financing, and this is being matched with private financing to support green and blue projects. And these are projects that actively contribute to environmental sustainability and climate change goals. The facility is owned by the ASEAN governments. They have equity into it, but it is supported through administration by the ADB, and we've got 13 partners with project financing commitments at the moment of about $1.4 billion. Now, how this works and what is a little bit innovative about it is it uses the facility's own equity and also some of the concessional funds that we're bringing in from various partners, along with innovative financing instruments and structures to do some of that de-risking that I had talked about. And a key part of this is really to reduce the overall costs of capital. If capital can flow into projects that have a lower overall cost, or where interest rates are lower, or where risks are lower, most investors will put it there, unless they're really, dedicated to impact investment for some of the SDG goals. So we need to bring down some of those costs and de-risk. So that's really a key focus for us in the fund. We've also got some ability to modify interest rates. And I think something that's quite interesting with this facility is that we do a bit of de-risking by actually having very, very low rates for investment over the first 7 years, which allows, say, investors, say we're talking about plastic, so say a company wants to come on board with an innovative recycling model, but there is risk involved. Let's bring down the capital in the first 7 years while they're getting their business model running, while they're starting to ramp up profits. And once they hit that point, then returns are there, and then they can afford to pay back more rates. So we're taking this sort of innovation within the fund. Now, we already have a pipeline of 17 green projects, plus we're also doing some enabling work under the fund, currently helping Indonesia and Cambodia to develop blended marine financing vehicles. And in addition, we're looking to develop new investments around marine plastic pollution and solid waste management. So that was the ACGF. And then lastly, I want to come back just to ground some of this in terms of how we're applying it to our work around plastics more specifically. So under our Healthy Oceans program, we've launched a number of flagship programs. And one of these is working towards a plastic-free ocean, taking a source to sea approach. The objective of the program is really to help governments tackle marine plastic pollution by boosting investments. And this is covering things like integrated solid waste management, while also working towards accelerating a transition to a circular plastics economy. Now, the program is being developed through a regional technical assistance. We're currently working with 5 countries that you can see on the slide there, and we're hoping to expand this in the future. Now, taking a sort of a broad source to sea approach, there's 4 main areas of activities that we're supporting. The first is around government-led action plans, and this is making sure that there's really long-term strategies in place and linking those to sustainable financing solutions to really make it all happen. Second, I mentioned before around policy reforms to stimulate the circular economy. So we're supporting work to help countries to enable market-based instruments, such as the use of domestic taxes and subsidies to incentivize green business, and also the further development of supply chains for plastics. Third, we're based on that planning work, based on the policy reform work, we're certainly looking to support pollution reduction investments and demonstrations, and then also knowledge and capacity work, including financing national roadmaps and the development of those roadmaps. Now, to give you a quick example of this, in Indonesia, we're developing, along with the government and other partners, a project called Plastic Sulit. It's being co-financed through the Global Environment Facility. One of the, I think, the interesting approaches with this one is it's supporting the development of what we're calling a circular business hub. And this comprises 2 main elements. The first is a knowledge hub. So this aims to engage local governments, communities, and also, I think importantly, micro, small and medium enterprises. And some of those have been the most hit by COVID-19 and obviously need some critical stimulus. So we're focusing on those, supporting knowledge sharing and innovation around plastic value chains and how investments can be stimulated and supported. Then taking that a step further, we're supporting a circular economy test facility, and this is intended to accelerate investment, incubate investment through support for technologies, through innovation, including innovative approaches, as well as funding proof of concept demonstration projects, and then supporting those with financial structuring and commercialization. So, looking at the whole marketing chain of say, a plastic supply chain, so that, recycling is one thing, but there has to be a market for it. So we're seeking to bring that together. And, we expect that this circular business hub can, ultimately help to attract future financial investment so that we can get to scale. And ultimately, I think, what we all want to see is the reduction in the volume of plastics going into the oceans. So, that's really where this has to end up with us. We need volume of finance so that we can get a significant avoidance or reduction in plastics. So with that, Anthony, I do really want to say thank you for this opportunity to frame some discussion here, particularly to OECD, but also to all of the other partners that are putting this session on. We're very keen to collaborate with other partners, and now more than ever, working together can really help us achieve some impact on this issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bruce. And that presentation very ably set the scene for our discussion to come in this session. Focus on universal definitions and standards, on the blue pipeline, the instruments that you have in place, issues around generating multiple sources of capital and de-risking, so on and so forth. And your two examples at the end were very, very helpful. So now it would be great. We will now delve in more depth into some of these issues as we tease out some of the national experiences and the more regional experiences and global experiences as well. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel now. I'll just introduce them briefly first, and then we'll get into some questions. So on the panel, we have Eddie Mazuancia bin Mohd Al Murad, who is the Deputy Undersecretary for Environmental Management Division in the Ministry of Environment and Water in Malaysia. Dr. Yoko Tri Haryanto, who is a researcher in the Ministry of Finance in Indonesia. Mr. Crispin Lau, who is the Vice Chair and Private Sector Representative to the Philippines National Solid Waste Management Commission. Piero Totora, a colleague from the OECD, who is the coordinator for the Sustainable Ocean for All in the OECD's Development Cooperation Directorate, and Ms. Anjali Acharya, who is the regional lead for marine plastics in East Asia and the Pacific for the World Bank. Eddie, if I could turn to you first, perhaps you can tell us what economic instruments Malaysia has put in place to address marine plastics pollution, for example, taxes, pollution charges, and so on. We'd be very interested to hear the Malaysian experience here. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Anthony. Thank you to OECD for providing me the platform to really share what Malaysia has put in place and also what we have beyond 2020. Very briefly, I have two slides to share with you, and if I seek the cooperation from the Secretariat to share the slides. And it's just a simple two slides. One is what we have on the table and what is in the pipeline for 2021 onwards. And the last slide would only be sharing out issues that we face in implementing those initiatives. Very briefly, as a response to GenBack research in 2015, Malaysia has taken serious steps in tackling the issue of plastic waste at source. And Malaysia's roadmap towards zero single-use plastic was launched in October 2018, specifically aiming to reduce plastic waste production. This is to be done through multiple phase approach. And this includes the implementation of financial and economic instruments such as plastic charges based on polluter pay principle or user pay principle, promoting extended producer responsibility EPR scheme, and packaging recovery through various means. And in Malaysia, we impose now a minimum charge of 20 cents for every plastic bag consumed. And to date, we have managed to convince all states authorities and government to implement the pollution charge. And this will be done in a phased approach. And we expect by 2022, all state government will start charging 20 cents per plastic bag. Apart from that, to mainstream this agenda further, we have set a KPI within the ministry. And by KPI, I mean where Clean Sea initiative is one of the main agenda. And through this initiative, we are aiming actually to reduce 20% of marine plastic pollution by 2030. And on top of that, Malaysia is now developing circular economy roadmap for plastic with the collaboration from World Bank through its Pro-Blue funding. And this roadmap will be highlighting the policy measures needed, especially at the upstream in order to achieve plastic circularity. And on the EPR perspective, it is now in the pipeline, and we are currently working with GIZ to really come up with EPR implementation plan. And some of the component includes policy instrument, capacity development, stimulating recycled plastic market by removing market barriers, and also to look into improving design of products and services. This is with regards to eco-designing, eco-labeling standards, and so on and so forth. Last but not least, we are also trying to close the loop through the partnership with COBSEA and SIDA for the development of national marine litter policy. And this particular policy will focus on strengthening evidence base for informed decision making to really address marine litter. And this is to be done by building one, national capacity to monitor plastic material flow, and secondly, to assess waste leakage hotspots. And this is, of course, to be in line with global best practices. And that is what we have for now and in the pipeline beyond 2020. And if I can move to my next slide, where I'll be focusing on some of the critical issues that we as the developing nation is facing in our journey of implementing those plans. Firstly, in streamlining the implementation of pollution charges between federal and state level, we see the understanding of pollution charge as deterrent, not as the income generation for the states. So this particular understanding needs to be made clear by all respective stakeholders before we can even physically charge 20 cents. And with regards to EPR, getting industry, and especially in Malaysia, we know for the fact that 98% of all industry are within the SME spectrum. And to get our SME to be on board towards implementing circular economy and EPR in totality is quite a hurdle for us. And if I were to make an example, post-COVID has given a very drastic or dramatic impact to the economy. And for the small and medium enterprises, their main priority now is for their profit sustainability. So in order for them to allocate portion of their profit to contribute to implementing EPR in totality, there's a gap that we need to fill up. And last but not least, again, the issue of behavioral change. And as far as the panelists from Indonesia has been given a very tremendous example by changing behavior of the population, it really can address marine litter or litter issue as a whole. For this, Malaysia, through the Ministry of Environment and Water, is promoting bring your own bags whenever we go for shoppings, whenever we go for buying foods and stuff. And in order for us to really understand circularity and value of waste, we are of the view that incentive for consumers needs to be in place so that consumer can value plastic not as waste, therefore they won't litter. So those kind of mind conditioning needs to be done. And I think I believe that through buyback program from a big corporation can help this to be implemented further. And again, when we talk about SEPA, communication, education, and public awareness, normally the target audience are the public. But now what we need is a specific niche SEPA for the industry so that the business and also the consumers can really understand and can play their significant role in controlling or managing plastic before they become waste. With that, I stop at this juncture and I'll pass over back to Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And that is a very interesting insight into the way Malaysia is tackling this issue and your focus on circular economy and extended producer responsibility, particularly in the context of small and medium enterprises, really does highlight some of the challenges there. And it's very interesting, your reflections on the pollution charges and the issues around coordination and communication around that are key. If I could turn now to Yoko, from the Indonesian perspective, perhaps you can outline for us what mechanisms has the government of Indonesia put in place to help close the funding gap? In what financial mechanisms are used or are being developed? I know that Indonesia is very innovative in this regard, so I look forward to hearing your thoughts on that, Yoko. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Long time no see. Yeah. Perhaps I can share my PPT, like our best colleagues from the our close neighbor from the Malaysia. Indonesia has one of the biggest population in the world, number 3. We also set what we call a double high commitment to overcome the climate change issue and also as well as a SDG target. From the commitment to overcome the climate change issue, we divided into 3 policy instruments. The first policy instrument we set in 2011, national commitment reducing GHG emission, and then we divided into 2 big umbrella under the mitigation and also adaptation. And 2015, we add also another issue related with biodiversity conservation. So from the policy instrument 1, we have 3 big issue, commitment to reduce GHG emission under the mitigation, also promoting adaptation to reduce climate resilience, and also promoting biodiversity conservation. And after we ratified the Paris under the Paris Agreement 2015, we set what we call Indonesian law number 16 in 2016. And from the policy instrument number 2, then we follow to the policy instrument number 3 that we set our target under the NDC, Indonesian NDC, to fulfill the Paris Agreement. 29% in 2030, and also if Anthony could add from the international money, international support, we can add until 41% in 2030. From the financial aspect, like another country, they already done also that. Indonesia in 2017, actually, we already issued what we call government regulation number 46, 2017, regarding on the environment economic instrument. If we look from this government regulation consists almost 18 economic environment instrument. And with many various different regime. Yeah, we talk about promoting fiscal regime that we promote coalition from so many local government that they can implement what we call payment ecosystem services. And we are also promoting ecological fiscal transfer among the national level to the province level, from the province level to the district, and also village area. And then we also impose what we call still on the final discussion with the parliament, what we call green tax. Yeah, similar with Malaysia already done that. We also propose single plastic charge, but still final discussion with the parliament. At the same time, we also promote monetary regime that under OJK, they promote, they issued also what they call sustainability financing. So they promote green banking as well as the green insurance. And also in 2019, actually last year, we set what we call Indonesia Environmental Trust Fund. Through this Indonesia Environmental Trust Fund, we have a mandate, to set what we call a domestic carbon market. So now, actually, we are still on the final discussion together with the Ministry of Environment and Fisheries and also Ministry of Maritime. Yeah, we propose a draft of the presidential regulation talking about the domestic carbon market. From the implementation of this government regulation in 2017, actually, we implement also what we call budget taking process, because through the budget taking process, we try to look what's the benefit and also what's the right budget spending, not only for the supporting activity, but we can select it which the core and also the ultimate spending, and also which one only supporting spending. This is quite interesting. After we implement budget taking process in 2015, actually, we can issue what we call Green Indonesian Sovereign Green Sukuk in 2018. And just your information, if Malaysia, one of the leading issue on the Syariah and also Sukuk, we can follow Malaysia, because in 2018, actually, we issued the first green Sukuk in the world. We can cut almost 1.25 billion US dollar. And then we follow in 2019, we issued the second sovereign green Sukuk. We got almost 750 million. And also during this year, even we are still facing recession and also pandemic, we still keep our commitment to issue the third green sovereign green Sukuk in June 2020. We still got almost 750 million US dollar. And in November last year, actually, after we issued global green Sukuk, sovereign green Sukuk, we also continue our commitment, particularly from the domestic market, that we issued the first retail green Sukuk. And then we got almost 1.46 trillion rupiah. And then continue in December 2020, we issued the second retail green Sukuk. If we talk about green Sukuk, actually money from green Sukuk could be delivered from 9 eligible green sector. So the first green sector, we talk about renewable energy, resilient climate change, energy and waste management, sustainable agriculture, sustainable transportation, green tourism, green building, clean technology, and also sustainable natural resource management. And this document actually already reviewed by Cicero. Just your information that Cicero is one of the best reviewer in the world. And we got from the overall, from the Indonesian green bond, green Sukuk document, we got a setting on the medium green. And if we divide it into 9 eligible green sector, we can prioritize, and also we can focusing the setting on the dark green. So if we select dark green from 9 eligible green sector, we have 2 sector that they have setting on the dark green. So dark green means if we sell to the investor, we can get a lot of money from the investor. So if we talk about the potential support for marine littering, maritime littering, marine littering, I think it's could be categorized under the energy and also waste management from non-eligible green sector. So this is my presentation, Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yoko. And it was a very timely reminder to us all that in fact the marine plastic pollution issue is indeed nested within a broader agenda of climate change and SDGs, and within the broader environmental fiscal reform and the fiscal regimes of countries. And it's very useful to see what Indonesia is doing in this regard. It's very ambitious and very innovative. So we look forward to delving into that a little more later in the session. If I can turn now to Crispian Lau, who is, as I said before, with the Philippines National Solid Waste Management Commission. Crispian, you've been doing a lot of work on public-private partnerships. Perhaps you can tell us how you see these approaches, this kind of initiative, helping to coordinate collective action and really addressing the financing challenges to waste management. Crispian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Well, one of the biggest challenges for an archipelagic and developing nation like the Philippines is solid waste management infrastructure. The cities and municipalities are actually primarily responsible for the management of waste, and they are actually tasked with shouldering the cost. And it depends on the priorities of the local government chief executives and availability of local funds, whether they put money into waste management. We just had a big storm that passed. And apart from COVID, a lot of funding actually were diverted to all these other issues and calamities that needs to be addressed by the local government units. While there are no appropriations provided for the National Solid Waste Management Fund, government agencies like the Department of Environment and Natural Resources and the Department of Agriculture are providing support infrastructure like MRF equipment or even composting facilities to help the local government units. Despite that, only about 30% of the barangays or the smallest unit of government have established material recovery facilities, and only 25% of our local government units have access to sanitary landfills for final disposal of their waste. This can be attributed to perhaps why we have a big leakage issue in this country. The collection rates are relatively high, but the proper disposal remains to be a big problem. And this is where opportunities for public-private partnerships can step in to really fill the gap. There are existing models where private sector have stepped in to set up material recovery facilities and partnered with local government units for waste treatment and disposal development. One of the biggest challenges faced actually is the 3-year political cycle of local leaders and the continuity of programs across political boundaries. And these are some of the things that we are addressing at the national level through policies, through guidelines and policies given to the local government units. And one of those is integrating that into the 10-year solid waste management plans of local government units, so that the next leader is either amends the plan or is responsible for implementing the plan. Of course, we also have the Department of Interior and Local Government that would step in case contracts are not respected. But this still remains to be a challenge. The enabling environment needs to be further established to ensure profitable business models, because this is key for long-term sustainability and replicability of projects and programs. No private sector entity would come in if there is no potential profit to be made. We can have blended finance to lower the interest cost, to make it the project more viable. But it's really important to have that sustainable enabling environment to ensure that the investments are secured. It is very important. I think the establishment of the national and local policy incentives needs to be put in place and secured, so that we can have the security of first the feedstock and offtake markets for all these products produced by the infrastructure that is being built. Collaboration is key, and roles need to be clearly defined over the whole spectrum of waste management. Once approved, the National Plan of Action of the Philippines on Marine Litter will present not only programmatic and enabling or supporting strategies, but identify the role of each stakeholder that each stakeholder needs to play, and who in government would lead it. It has been all over the place, and we have finally, put our acts together, have everybody sit down on one table and address this. The private sector, through the Philippine Alliance for Recycling and Material Sustainability, has declared the Zero Waste to Nature 2030 ambition, with top brands and major industry groups taking the lead and working with the entire waste value chain, and will soon release the roadmap and strategy that aims to develop the pathways to prevent plastic waste into the environment. We are guided by the circular economy models through reduction, reuse models, recovery for collection, and recycling. And the industry is now very much open to an EPR system that is currently being developed at the local context. Now, with these policies and programs in place, investment opportunities are now in place for public-private partnerships in the area of collection, sorting, waste treatment, final disposal, including wastewater treatment, which is where infrastructure is really needed in this space. So thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Crispin, and it's great to get your perspectives on the role of public-private partnerships and how we need to ensure that these plans are integrated into a longer-term strategy that really doesn't get captured by or disrupted by the shorter-term political cycle. You raised the issue of blended finance, and I'm sure that is something that our next panelist is going to touch on. It's my great pleasure to introduce Piera Totora, who is, as I said, with the OECD's Development Cooperation Directorate. Piera, perhaps you can fill us in on your thoughts on how can development finance help attract the private finance in support of integrated solutions to combat marine plastic pollution. Piera, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and good afternoon to everyone, or good morning to everyone. Yes, so Anthony, as you may know, as part of the Sustainable Ocean for All initiative, which aims to support developing countries' transition to sustainable ocean economies, we have started to track official development assistance for a sustainable ocean economy. So let me provide 4 key considerations from this work that I think will be relevant to this discussion today. And thank you for pulling up the slides. We can put the next one, please. So first of all, we're tracking ODA for the sustainable ocean economy by looking at 3 main indicators. We look at ODA, which is allocated to ocean-based sectors and ecosystems. That's the first indicator. Then we look at how much of that can be considered as contributing to enhancing sustainability. That's the second. And thirdly, we look at ODA that is addressing marine pollution that comes from land-based activities. And this is very relevant because we know that a lot of marine pollution originates on land, and this is especially true when it comes to plastic pollution. So when we look at all of this ODA resources together, actually 40% we estimate is addressing impacts on the ocean from land. And this is in 2013-18 about 11 billion of US dollars. Or 1.9 billion on average a year. And this, it's pretty small. It's about 1% of total ODA. And when we look more specifically at how much ODA actually contributes to tackle specifically marine plastic litter, this figure goes down even further. It reaches $361 million in 2013-18. So the first consideration that I want to put on the table is that ODA globally to fight ocean plastic pollution is still quite small. The second one, looking more specifically at Southeast Asia, we know that Southeast Asia is recognized as one of the regions where the problem of plastic pollution is the greatest in the world. And we're seeing its impacts on many sectors, tourism, fisheries, global, on human health, etc. And yet the prioritization of ODA on this region when it comes to fighting plastic pollution doesn't seem to reflect this. So our figures, and you see there the numbers by country, point out that only 14% of this global allocations to fight marine pollution from land actually targets Southeast Asia. And the prioritization of waste management, which is more closely related to plastic pollution, is also varies a lot across countries in the region, and is especially small in countries like Indonesia, where it's about 8% of the total. Now, the third thing that I wanted to mention briefly is how has this financing actually been used? And we have heard also in the first session that the problem of plastic pollution needs to be tackled across the plastics life cycle. So from source reduction to enhanced waste management, to recycling, to cleanup and remediation activities. So in this cycle, where is ODA actually impacting? Where is it contributing to make a difference? Actually, what we see from our data is that mainly ODA is being used to support national and local governments to enhance waste management systems. But at the same time, steps are being taken to actually increasingly put emphasis and support also on capacity building, on building local skills, on good governance, on collaborating also with local governments and local communities, as well as businesses and civil society to enable a little bit that society-wise change that we also heard about in the first session. And if we move to the second slide, we can see a number of projects that are being implemented in the region that take some of these approaches. But let me also provide a little bit of a positive note, and this is that even though ODA for marine plastic pollution is still quite small, it is also growing significantly. We've seen that ODA figures move from $38 million a year in 2013-14 on average to $70 million a year in the 2017-18. And also we are seeing a growing international momentum. So there is a number of initiatives that have been launched at the global level and that we still don't see reflected actually in our ODA data figures. We know that about the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, so Japan leveraging its G7 presidency to mobilize attention on plastic pollution. There is the Chevrolet Blueprint, spearheaded by Canada on the same issue, and a number of also international initiatives that have been launched. We heard before about the ADB Plan for Healthy Oceans. So there is, I think the good news is that there is increasing momentum, and there are a number of international initiatives that countries like Indonesia and other countries in the region can tap into. And the second element of the positive news, I think, is that there is also opportunities for countries for better understanding what can be the role of the private sector in all of this. For example, in the creation and use of alternative materials. and how can public policies and financing, including ODA, encourage the private sector contribution to enhance sustainability in this sector. So if we move to the last slide very quickly, in our work, we see that there's 3 ways that that ODA and public policies can help this new role from the private sector and can help reorient private finance. There is the catalytic use of ODA. Bruce talked about it. So we are seeing that increasingly development cooperation providers are using grants, concessional loans, guarantees to do risk investments, or let's say enhance the risk return profiles of investments in this area. We also see that the international development community has been supporting the creation of new financial instruments like blue bonds and others that are aimed at capitalizing and mobilizing private capital. And of course, public policies can do much in terms of setting the right enabling environment and the right regulations for helping to reorient finance towards sustainability. And there we can see some numbers, and I will close with that. At the global level, about 2.96 billion were mobilized through ODA in terms of private finance, and 57% of that actually was targeting land-based activities that do have an impact on the ocean. So these are some elements that I was happy to share with you, and I look forward to any questions and to hear more through the course of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Piera, and I would commend participants on this dialogue to have a look at the report that Piera was reporting on there. The link to it is in the chat. It is a very data-rich report that gets into the issue of official development assistance and is linked to blended finance. And I was very pleased that Piera finished up on the positive news coming out of the report and the discussion generally. I might now turn to our last panelist. And it's my pleasure to call on Anjali Acharya, who is with the World Bank. And perhaps, Anjali, if you could tell us how the World Bank has used grant financing from ProBlue to help support countries and the region in addressing the challenges of marine plastic pollution. And if I've mispronounced your name, please correct me now, and I'll get it right in the future. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anthony, and you pronounced it perfectly right this time. So thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to really talk a little bit about the work that the World Bank has been doing on marine plastics. And here I just want to define it a little bit, which is, I'm talking about marine plastics in particular, not marine pollution, not blue economy. These are all larger concepts. So I'm just narrowing in on the particular focus of marine plastics. Do you see my slide? Yes?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, all right. So let me just start off with showing you a little bit about the kind of work that we're doing across the region. While the World Bank has been engaged in marine plastics work, in solid waste management activities for the last 2 decades, it has been over the last 3 to 4 years that we've been more systematically engaged in the work on marine plastics. Why? Because plastics is a particular waste material and particular resource that has been overused, overconsumed, wasted, showing up, and its longevity in the waste stream and its environmental and now economic impacts are considerable. With that in mind, we had really focused in on trying to first understand the space in terms of what the kinds of issues are. Anthony, right in the beginning, you talked about what is the issue? Is there enough finance? Is there not enough finance? Is it the type of financing? What is it? What are the barriers that if we start with the hypothesis that plastic is in fact a resource, it is in fact value that is embedded and it's not a waste product, how can we then bring that to fruition? What is limiting private sector from coming in? What is limiting governments from investing in saving this resource? What is it that the combination of policies and investments that's needed? So what we wanted to do is first seek to understand how to make a stab at this issue. And for that, we leveraged about $9 million of trust fund financing, not only from ProBlue, I just wanted to mention, we also have trust fund money from the Korean Green Growth Trust Fund. We have in Indonesia, a separate trust fund on oceans that is financed by Norway and Denmark. So we have in all in the region raised about $9 million of trust funds. In all these countries, we are doing work along the following elements. We're looking at metrics. So this is really on understanding what type of plastic, where does it flow, where does it start, what is the resin type, how much of it is generated, what are the choke points, what are the hotspots, what are the policies related to this, what are possible solutions. These are all the metrics work that we're doing. And depending on the country context, we are adjusting the metrics work. So in Indonesia, and I'm very glad to share the panel with my colleagues from Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, because in all these three countries, we're doing considerable amounts of work. So in Indonesia, for example, we've done a detailed baseline assessment that really looks into assessing a full analysis of plastics leakage across the country and come up with a baseline number that takes into account not only where it's generated, but how it flows into river systems, how it goes down through river systems, and then what ends up in marine water. So clearly, we all know that when we say marine plastics, we don't just mean plastics at the beach or in the marine areas. In the Philippines, for example, we are working, including with Crispian Lau, on doing some of the work on the plastic value chain. So this is just another example of the kind of work that we're doing, seeking to understand what is the plastic, types of plastic resins that have the more value, what are the current recycling capacities, what is the current potential for recycling of that particular plastic resin, what are the barriers to private sector entry. We undertook a huge exercise to be able to understand what these barriers to private sector entry into the space were, so that we would be able to help to direct investments. In Indonesia, we had also done some work, significant work on behavior change, and this is a big need across the region on how to rethink our relationship with plastic, because at the end of the day, plastic was and is a miracle product and an innovation. It is just our overconsumption of it and our carelessness in a way that has led to this problem. We're also doing work on policy elements, and this is sort of linked to our support on key analytics and policy support. So in all the countries, we are either supporting the National Plan of Action or National Marine Debris Action Plan, or helping to create it, and therein finding the entry points in terms of fiscal instruments, in terms of different kinds of regulations, etc. Apart from country by country activities, we have also now entrusted by the ASEAN Secretariat on behalf of the ASEAN member states to prepare an ASEAN Regional Action Plan on Marine Debris. This will be out later this year. It is going through the process of formal endorsement. And this reflects collective actions that the 10 ASEAN member states have articulated as their main need. So this includes everything from regional harmonization of standards, regional certification systems, regional toolkits, regional resources, regional innovation platforms, regional financing platforms. So a lot of different kinds of activities and platforms and knowledge bases to be able to connect, to build on common elements. And how are we catalyzing across the waste chain? Really, we start with the analytics, but the second part of your, the part of your question, Anthony, was how do we then, sort of expand on this? And really it is about looking at the analytics to help inform then plastic circularity, waste management, and cleanup activities through investments. And we're doing this in various ways. Of course, as you know, the World Bank works through investments in key sectors. We have a multi-sectoral strategy. We work with ministries of environment, but also ministries of industry, ministries of agriculture, ministries of maritime affairs, etc. So right now we're in a process of scaling up on investment projects with plastic components and activities. Our sister organization, the International Finance Corporation, has been doing massive investments now with the private sector in plastics recycling. They recently signed a deal with Indorama, one of the largest PET recyclers, for $300 million. And also on the regional front, we are bringing critical grant financing to help support the regional actions that have been articulated in the regional action plan. And we are planning to create a platform where we invite other development partners to also bring their financing in terms of parallel financing, but under a common umbrella so that we can agree on a vision going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anjali. And your focus on metrics and roadmaps and the coordinated approaches across the organizations are very, very relevant, very useful. I might take this at this point in time the opportunity to remind participants that you can pose questions in the chat or directly in the Q&A. And we will have some time, I hope, at the end of this session to delve into some of the questions from participants. So, but now I might launch on a second round of questions with our panelists. And if I could ask the panelists to very briefly address some of the questions that arise as a result of their first intervention. So, Eddie, if I can turn to you to start with. You have identified EPR schemes as a major focus of work in Malaysia going forward. In just very briefly, what are the one or two key challenges that you think are most important in implementing EPR schemes in Malaysia?
Thank you, Anthony. I mean, as a conceptual tool, EPR is the tool that is deemed workable, and it can address the issue of mismanaged plastic in totality. But the main issue that we need to focus on is to make it applicable in totality, not just an extension of a CSR. Because if large corporation is only taking it as an extension of the current CSR initiative, I mean, the burden of providing disposal facility, for example, is still will be handled by the government. So EPR does not seem to be implemented in totality. So the understanding or the applicability of EPR needs to be throughout the whole value chain. Then only we can see it will be a successful tool in addressing marine litter or plastic management issue. Number two, with regards to the fee structure of establishing a PRO, for example, in implementing EPR. The best recommendation so far is through a modulated fee structure. Now, a modulated fee structure, I mean, again, the concept is good and it's workable. There's no question about it. But the main question for a country like Malaysia or any other country is the alpha value. What exactly is the alpha value to the degree of product recyclability? Because product recyclability is a very specific context within individual countries. So we need to really identify the alpha value. Then only we will have a base price for recycle processes, and then only industry within a particular context of a particular country can be on board implementing the EPR. And this is very significant issue for Malaysia as a developing nation, because most of the industry within Malaysia context are all from SME. And if you don't really have a workable alpha value for those particular industry to be on board within EPR context, it won't work. Even though the concept of modular fee structure is the most recommended concept. Again, I think the understanding within a specific country context is critical to be to ensure that EPR will be implemented in totality. Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks a lot, Eddie, and it's good to hear the experience of the getting into the very detailed approaches to modulated fee structures within EPRs. That's a core issue, and it's very interesting to hear of Malaysia's experience there. Yoko, if I could turn to you. You mentioned in your first intervention that Indonesia issued a sovereign green bond in 2019. How do you think we can extend this out to other sectors, and in particular to those sectors that are relevant to reducing marine plastics pollution?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if
Yoko,
we talk about the possibility, it's already open. Yeah, thank you, Anthony. If I think if we
I think you're still
would
muted,
like to,
Yoko.
okay.
Oh, you can hear you now? Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. If we talk about the possibility to link about the issuing of the sovereign green suku and also marine plastic and also littering, I think the crucial period is under the budget taking process. Yeah, because you know that before we sell the underlying project through the green suku, actually we conduct what we call budget taking process. And unfortunately, until now, if we talk about the waste management budget taking process, we are still focused on the terrestrial issue. So we are still focusing waste management under the terrestrial issue, not linked with the plastic, marine, and also marine waste. So if we want to add for the time being, for the next couple of years, or perhaps next year, actually better if the line minister, like under the Ministry of Maritime and also Investment, share with us their data, and also together we conduct budget taking on the marine plastic, and then we can selected so many underlying project asset, and then we can sell under the green suku fund perhaps next year. And we can also have another option, because just your information also that during this year, actually we are still preparing to issue what we call SDG bond. So to complete with our commitment issuing green suku, green bond, and also green retail suku in 2019 perhaps, yeah, because now we are still finalization to set what we call SDG framework, and then doing with HSBC and also another joint lead manager from a banking system, we prepare issuing SDG bond in 2021. So if we talk about the prioritize to finance marine plastic and also waste under the marine area, perhaps first we can conduct under the budget taking prioritize, and then we can sell through the green suku or SDG bond for the 2021 year. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Yoko. Much appreciated. And it's good to hear what the plans going forward are. Crispin, if I could turn to you now. In your first intervention, you mentioned the role of risk. What is Philippines doing in its design of public-private partnerships to reduce the risk to taxpayers' money? In just two of the key things that you're doing, just briefly, so we can get a feel for that.
Well, the model of private-public partnerships in the Philippines is not really putting much money from taxpayers' funds. You know, Most of the investments are from the private sector. What needs to be provided by the local governments or the national government would either be the land, the space, and also the guarantee of the waste feedstock. So I think what the private sector in funding waste management infrastructure is looking for is well, sometimes not even the land. It's just a guarantee of feedstock and guarantee of offtake markets to ensure a viable business. So there's not really much taxpayers' money that that is exposed, no, to financial risk, if that is what we're pointing to.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's good to know how Philippines is addressing this, and that you've managed to tap into the into less taxpayers' money. I think that is a strong way forward. So, congratulations there. Pierre, if I could turn to you.
Yeah, having said that, you know, while this becomes a bigger challenge because the chunk of investments comes from private sector, and recovery of those investments becomes a bigger challenge from the financial point of view. So it would be nice if national government or local governments can share part of the investment structure to make it more realistic, you know, because government funds once spent are there already. So yeah, just to add to that, you know.
Well, in fact, thanks, Crispin. That's actually a nice segue to Piera, who has been doing a lot of work recently on how we can have these integrated solutions across the different sources of capital. And Piera, can you help Crispin out here? How can development finance help the situation here?
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, well, I think, you know, we have, I think I have highlighted already a few elements there in that we really see that the public policies and finance, and including international ones, can help at three main levels. So the first one is very much the regulations. Sometimes, you know, we ask what is the kind of way to create the right incentives to get rid of straws or, you know, single-use plastics, and in the end, you know, sometimes the solution is actually a ban, so a regulation. And then the other two ways are, as I mentioned, one is really using different existing ODA instruments like grants, ODA, etc., to make more profitable some of the investments. And the other one is really what we see very promising is the creation of new financing instruments. And so maybe one element that I could add is that, for example, in the region, the circular capital fund has been established through support of USAID. And this is also a very positive example where a donor has put some grant financing, but also some guarantees to establish a new fund that will actually mobilize some additional financing. And not only the donor community can help setting up those funds, but they can also really help establishing, you know, the famous pipeline of projects that we heard about, and in a way that I think, you know, when we talk about the sustainable ocean economy more broadly, it's not just about a pipeline of projects, but we really have to make sure that it's sustainable projects. So we go back to that issue of definitions and standards that also Bruce has mentioned before. And I think there's a lot of work that the international community can do together with countries to get that right, so that we don't end up in the blue washing problem. And I think also another element that the donor community can really help with is in terms of the size of the projects and how to aggregate those projects in a way that are more palatable for investors.
Thanks very much, Piera. In fact, your reference to blue washing is very timely. It's the first we've heard that term in this session, but I think it's very important. And that's where we get back to links to what the other panelists have been talking about, particularly around metrics and definitions and transparency around this. I think that's very important. Anjali, if I could turn to you, you raised in your first intervention the trust fund approach that the World Bank is using. Perhaps we can delve into that a little more briefly, if I can ask you about how these trust funded activities can help to catalyze investments in marine plastics solutions in the region, both in the public and the private sector. And just before you answer, I'll just tell people we will run over a little bit in this, and there's a very active chat going on as well if you want to jump in there, with lots of links to reports and to events. So thanks colleagues for throwing the chat, for putting their thoughts into the chat section. So Anjali, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Anthony. And maybe I can just clarify, it's not really a trust fund approach. It is to start with the analytics, the metrics, and the policy support, and then scale up to the investment. So just wanted to clarify that it's not just focused only on the trust fund part of it. As you know, the World Bank is a major development partner to a lot of the countries. But to your question as to how we start with this evidence base, with this knowledge, with this information, and translate that into scaled up and replicable investments that are also sustainable, just to attach to Piera's points. Let me give you a couple of examples. So right now, we have done and are doing analytical work across the region, as I had mentioned in my PowerPoint earlier. So for example, now in Indonesia and Cambodia, we have solid waste management projects that are under preparation that have key components of financing that relate to plastics specifically. These are, in some cases, in the Indonesia case, it's technical assistance given to small cities to help to build up and identify different kinds of plastics activities. In the Philippines, in another example, there is a sustainable tourism project being developed. And so under that, we're exploring the possibility of looking at how we can work with the hospitality industry, with the tourism industry, because in the post-COVID economic recovery, when the tourism industry builds back, we need to build back better. So how can we build back plastic smart? And that is the key of how we're going to include the investments that. In Vietnam, for example, we're looking at fisheries projects and coastal resilience projects to see what are the intersection points for plastic activities and plastic components to be built in, and how can they be sustained beyond the life of the project by institutionalizing it, by looking very closely at city authorities, looking at ministries, key ministries who would take the lead on this. That's on the public sector side. On the private sector side, what we're doing is jointly with the IFC, we're working on studies to look, market studies to look at different plastic resins. So Mr. Eddie can talk well about the work that we're doing in Malaysia to really identify the types of plastic resins that have the most recyclability, and looking at the potential for bringing in those private sectors. Our IFC colleagues are also identifying different kinds of financing in dialogue and discussion on several private sector-led stakeholder platforms. What we're also recognizing, and also with discussions with impact investors like Secretariat Capital, is that there is a missing middle. Right in the beginning, Anthony, you talked about, is there enough finance, what type of finance, etc. It seems like there is finance at the high end and at the lowest end, but that missing middle, the kind of financing that helps to identify and showcase proofs of concept. Piera, you talked about, pipeline of projects, etc. There is a need also to showcase and demonstrate a lot of these innovative pilots that are coming out. So this means new materials, new business models, new financing models, new product design, new engagement patterns. All these things are, the newness of it is what is stopping a little bit the financing from coming into it. Some, we are starting to see the big players, the big recyclers, etc., getting into that space. But it's the small and medium, the ones that have the maximum impact and relationship to community levels. Mr. Eddie, whenever we talk to him, he always talks about the informal sector. So how can we use this particular opportunity that is afforded to us as we go through this COVID pandemic and come out of it? how can we use this to reset, to revitalize the plastics recycling market, to reset our relationship with plastics, and to bring together this public and private sector financing in a way that benefits all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anjali. And I love the term, the missing middle. I think that is something that really does capture one of the challenges there, going forward. It's now time for some interventions from the floor, and I might call in the first instance on a colleague, Julia Geibel, who is an advisor with Rethinking Plastics, the Circular Economy Solutions to Marine Litter with GIZ. Julia, are you able to make a short intervention?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Hi, welcome.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me this great opportunity to share insights of the EPR toolbox with you. Let me start by giving you some background information. The EPR toolbox was launched in September this year. It contains various training materials focusing on EPR for plastic packaging. The toolbox has been jointly developed by members of the multi-stakeholder partnership, Prevent Waste Alliance. The working process was mainly based on two key literatures. Everything okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My sound somewhere weird. Sorry. Yeah, the two key literatures, namely the OECD EPR guide, the updated guidance for efficient waste management, from which we have used the definition and approach of EPR, or also the manual on EPR of the Basel Convention of Importance. These documents are very useful to refer to have a common ground in the beginning of setting up an EPR scheme. Turning our attention now to the content and the structure of the EPR toolbox. It consists of 3 modules, including 13 fact sheets total, 5 country examples and facts. Module 1 covers the general aspects of EPR schemes for packaging. Module 2 addresses the main solid waste management points, collection and sorting of waste. And the 3rd module focuses on the aspects of recycling. GIZ projects in Southeast Asia, which are dealing with plastic waste, use the EPR toolbox as a base for activities. In conclusion, the principle of EPR can have a significant potential to achieve a range of policy objectives. And on that point, I will bring my intervention to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julia, and that's really helpful information, which complements nicely the discussion we've been having in this panel about EPRs. And if you haven't already, if you can provide a link to the source material in the chat, I think that would be much appreciated by participants. Our second targeted intervention will come from Ms. Anandita Normaria Samsul, who is the founder of the Waste Bank Surya. I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Anandita, on the initiative.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Antonio. Can you hear my voice?
We can indeed, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, Indonesian time. It is an honor to share some information about what we are doing in Surabaya to help tackle marine plastic waste pollution. Let me introduce myself. I'm Anindita, the founder of Bina Bakti Lungkyungan Foundation, which is the organization for the Surabaya Central Waste. I will briefly explain what the Waste Bank is for those who are not familiar with the term. The Waste Bank is an innovative financing mechanism which encourages people to save their waste instead of throwing it in any place. Waste that has been sorted by type will value it with money, and every transaction will be recorded in a saving book. The credit from the savings can be used for daily needs. For example, to pay for electricity, we are partnering with an electricity provider company to finance a collective recreation, village greening program, and medical treatment coupon, etc. Our Waste Bank was founded in 2010. We currently have 429 group waste banks from schools, offices, and housing complexes. In addition, we also have 512 individual customers who directly join the Surabaya Central Waste Bank. Currently, we are assisted by 12 employees so that we are able to reduce the pile of garbage by around 370.6 tons per year. We receive 53 types of waste, each of which we deliver to the processing plants or recycling factories. Let me share one interesting story about one of the Waste Bank customer from a village in Jambangan area, Surabaya. They use their credit for savings and loans program for people who face economic difficulties. Their loans are not subject to any interest and they are able to pay the loan with the waste they have at home. It reduces the dependency of people there with the money lenders during this pandemic. The waste value may not be high for some people, but for some people it does matter. We are also intensely aware of the importance of sorting waste from home with regular customer guidance and mentoring activity. We have a sorting report card which is routinely written in a sorting book. The most diligent citizens will be rewarded through an annual event with all group customers. That's our innovative financing instrument that we use to deal with plastic waste so that it doesn't pollute the ocean. Hopefully it can be an inspiration for all of the audience here. See you again in the next opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. And that is indeed an inspiring story and an inspiring initiative. And it would be very interesting to see how that example can be scaled up and transferred to other situations in the region and globally. We are now running a little over time, but we do have time for a couple of short questions. And I believe that we do have a question from Dr. Vong Sok, who is with the ASEAN Secretariat. Dr. Vong, did you want to make an intervention?
Thank you very much, Anthony, for this great opportunity. And in fact, it's not a big sort of question, but I mean, it's while ASEAN Secretary take the floor first, I just would like to thank to OECD and the government of Indonesia for organizing this second regional ocean policy dialogue, financing solution addressing marine plastic pollution. I think as my colleague mentioned from the first session, Dr. Sri mentions about the need for the finance to apply and implement the regional plan of action of marine debris. So with in line with the Bangkok Declaration on combating marine debris, ASEAN framework of action on marine debris. In this regard, I just would like to know and to hear the view from the speaker. I mean, this is the way we can learn and improve to continue our effort to make it better. So from your own perspective, I'm not sure whether from the ADB or from colleague OECD can highlight about what ASEAN and ASEAN member states could do more for improving the investment and harmonization or alignment for addressing the marine pollution or marine plastic debris in order to, create more bankable and create synergy impact for the region. So just would like to hear your opinion in this respect. And with this, we believe that we can do better and be prepared right now as it is at the juncture that we need to get this financial resource and harmonization and alignment in order to implement effectively the regional plan of action, as well as the way we can monitor better the situation of marine plastic debris in the region. Thank you very much. The floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vong. And so that's a broad question about regional harmonization and cooperation on this financing issue. Maybe just a very brief one-liner from each, what will be the key things that I think that we need to focus on as a region. Who would like to jump in first? Joko,
Yeah,
you have your mute off.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. Because Indonesia also including a member of ASEAN, just your information also that if we talk about how to alignment and also how to synchronize and also harmonize from our commitment with the ASEAN commitment also. Perhaps like what I already mentioned, that from the bigger perspective, even we talk about specific like the marine plastic and also marine debris commitment, perhaps better if we also look from the bigger perspective, bigger picture, and also bigger commitment that we already set our national target, and then the Paris Agreement, and also NDC target, and then the ultimate goal, we also seek the achievement of SDG commitment. From the technical aspect, achievement of NDC target and also SDG achievement, from our side, from the financing aspect, we can support and also speed up the financial aspect from the line minister. And the second thing, we also boosting our capacity when we deliver transfer to the region from the central government to the local government. That's your information. Yeah, in 2019, actually, we already implement the first local incentive fund from the central government to the local government. And then we still continue our commitment to increase the financial capacity from the central government to the local government. This is like the reward mechanism to promote local government to speed up and also to boosting their capacity to overcome the plastic issue in their location.
Thank you very much, Joko.
My speak. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Joko. Who else, would anyone like to briefly comment on that? Bruce, you just put your camera on. You look like you want to jump in.
Thanks, Anthony. A great discussion. Yeah, it's a big question, but just a couple of quick ones. So obviously we do have regional markets in the ASEAN area. So work around coordination and consistency on the policy front, including around extended producer responsibilities, looking at a sort of coordinated market approach. And also looking, we've got imports of plastics and differences in the way plastic imports and recycling is handled. This is also now being regulated under the Basel Convention. So some coordination there as well, so that we're treating that as a resource consistently. And then last quick one, I did mention earlier around the ACGF and the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund. All the ASEAN countries have got equity in that, and there's financial resources available to scale up. But we do need to do more work around financial roadmaps for the right sort of investments that each country need. So that's something that we could work on directly together, having more dialogues like this, but going specifically into financial needs, and obviously based on the analytics that Anjali talked about and other things, that has to be there, but that's something we could help on. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bruce. Maybe from Eddie or Crispin or Piera, and any very quick comments on the question from Dr. Bong. First of all, Eddie, and then Crispin, and maybe finish up with Piera.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Just to echo what Mr. Wong Sok has said, with regards to the realignment of regional focus in addressing marine plastic pollution. I think despite national activities or national initiative, what is lacking within regional perspective is the recycling technology. And if I were to put it as an example, after China banned importation of plastic waste, and we see recycling industry is in the dark. They don't know where to go, and they don't know what needs to be done to cope with the influx of demand by banning of plastic waste in China. So I think regionally, maybe ASEAN can take a lead initiative to really harmonize what kind of technology that the region needs to cope for the influx of plastic importation. And this, of course, has to be in line with Basel Convention and the rest of the convention. So just to echo what Mr. Wong has said. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Eddie. That's a very good point about technology there. Crispin.
Yeah, well, it would be nice if ASEAN goes for a single direction where we can really harmonize based on the national action plans, harmonize the activities towards a single direction for ASEAN. But going into more detailed perspective, maybe we can look into development of harmonized standards across the ASEAN. Recycling was mentioned, so we can actually develop standards for what can be recycled, how it should be recycled, and the output product of recyclates that make it feasible for investments in this area. ASEAN as a single market and as a regional hub can be a strong option. Given the China ban, this creates a very big opportunity for us. We just have to put the right policies in place. Yes, Basel has restrictions, but we have to clarify those restrictions so that we are made aware of what we can process. Again, ASEAN is still a good production hub for a lot of these developed countries.
Thank you very much, Crispin, and lots of nods around the screens there. I think you've touched on something that seems to be getting a lot of support. Piera, so very quick thoughts to wrap up this session.
Thank you, Anthony. Yes, just very quickly, 2 points. Well, the first one relates to what Bruce has mentioned around imports of plastics. And I think there's a lot there that also the international community can do in terms of helping harmonizing the policies regionally. And that's definitely one part of the issue. But then there is also the other coin of the other side of the coin, which the international policy coherence on this issue. So how the policies of the OECD members are actually coherent in this respect. And then the second point I wanted to make is, I think, from the first session and from this session, I think it's very clear that there is a lot of dynamism in the region in terms of policy approaches, in terms of financing, instruments and schemes, in terms of local initiatives. So there is a strong role for institutions, including the OECD, really to help foster sharing of experiences and mutual learning. And I think this is where we can really bring a lot. And I think this is where policy dialogues like this are really helpful. So I want to thank you again for organizing this and for inviting us to present.
Thank you very much, Piera. And that is a very good note on which to wrap up this session on finance. And I'd like to just acknowledge that there are still questions flowing in to the chat room there. And perhaps we can bring some of these questions up in the sessions tomorrow, the breakout sessions when we reconvene tomorrow at the same time in the same place, to delve into the on how we move forward in terms of developing policy guidance in some of these areas that are, we heard some very good examples of what countries are doing. We also heard some very positive news about the ways forward, but we also heard some of the real challenges around making sure that we are all moving in the right direction together. With that, I will wrap up this session and say thank you very much to our keynote address and to our panelists and to the audience for their participation. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon for the second day of the dialogue, and wish you all a very good rest of the day or rest of the evening, and please stay safe and stay healthy, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.